Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The Journey in Marvel Magician. Chapter 81. That night, Snape came to the secret room with the cauldron and a bunch of potion introductory materials. He glanced at Creature, who was busy in the secret room, and Lupin, who was instructing Li Fang's magic with an unhappy expression. Seeing Snape's arrival, Li Fang happily put away his magic, put down his wand, went forward to give a necromancer, and said, "Good evening, Professor Snape." Snape nodded slightly in response to Li Fang's greetings. He came to be a private professor and could afford Li Fang's necromancer. Snape looked at Lupin with a deep disdain. This guy was one of the characters he had been upset from when he was a student. It would be nice to draw out his wand and send him without meeting. Want to greet roar, how can it be? Frowning, Snape said in a tone that Li Fang felt soonere no matter how he heard it. It seems that I am not here at the right time. Maybe we need to make an appointment for another time. Although he knew that Lu Ping had been guiding Li Fang's magic in the secret room recently, he did not expect that the other party was still in the secret room during this period. He thought that Lu Ping would consciously get out after he had agreed on a teaching time with Li Fang. On the other hand, Lupin was the same. He didn't look at Snape with any good eyes, and he also didn't salute or greet him. However, unlike Snape, he knew that the other party would come to the secret room to teach Li Fang's potions at night, and he also understood that Li Fang was going to learn from them at the same time, so he directly ignored Snape's words and spoke to Li Fang. Said, "I hope you have enough energy to spend a summer vacation." After finishing speaking, he walked to a corner, playing with the doll target while practicing magic, waiting for Li Fang to come. Li Fang shrugged. Energy and other things were too easy for him to solve. As long as the magic power is enough, release a recovery, and all problems will be solved. Not to mention taking 2 courses at the same time, Li Fang said that he can afford to come to 10 professors at the same time. Li Fang made a please gesture to Snape, and at the same time that he signaled the other party to enter the tent, Li Fang took off the time converter from his neck. Snape knew what Li Fang was going to do when he saw the time converter, and he also understood why Lu Ping hadn't left after seeing the crucible and materials in his hand. Li Fang, who had the time converter, could indeed tell them at the same time. The capital of learning. Snape didn't talk nonsense, and directly let Li Fang start the actual operation after entering the tent, and he played the role of a poisonous tongue next to Li Fang. "Idiot, the textbook says distilled water, but what about you? Why do you pour plain water? Do you have the brain of a giant monster? See clearly that it is stirring clockwise 3.5 times, 3.5 times. The half circle of your clock is at an angle of more than 180 degrees. An hour later, Li Fang looked innocently at a bubbling, unidentified liquid emitting a pungent odor in the crucible. Snape was holding his nose and mouth, standing behind Li Fang in fear of being poisoned by an unknown liquid. In fact, Snape understood that this was the first time that Li Fang made a potion. It was pretty good that there was no frying pan in the middle. After all, no one was born to boil potions. Li Fang was able to boil potions for the first time. It's pretty good to be able to achieve the current achievements. Snape glanced at the pile of materials stored in the open suitcase, took out a sheepskin roll from his pocket and handed it to Li Fang. The crucible was ready to get out of the tent without cleaning up, and said, "That's all for today's teaching. Now that you have taken notes, practice more by yourself. Anyway, your potion materials are too much to hold." Before leaving, Snape didn't forget to suppress his tongue, and said with a regretful expression, "So many medicinal materials are in your hands, it's a pity." Ignoring the poisonous tongue, Li Fang was shocked when he took the parchment. He immediately thought of what was recorded on the parchment and exclaimed excitedly, "Creature, send me Professor Snape." After shouting, Li Fang lay on the desk with a grin, and copied the formula of the magic-boosting potion into the magic book. Considering that the same medicinal material has different names in different worlds, or the appearance of medicinal materials with the same effect has changed in other worlds, Li Fang searched for information while marking the growth environment and medicinal characteristics of the medicinal materials so as not to go to other worlds. The world misses alternatives when looking for medicinal materials. Not long after Snape left, Lupin also finished the day of teaching. After entering the tent, he took out a letter from his pocket and handed it to Li Fang, saying, "Remember the Jinny Wei who was caught by the basilisk in the secret room?" Sly. Feng Li felt that he was asked a bit inexplicable, Wife Harry, I definitely remember. Nodded, Li Feng motioned to Lu Ping to continue. Lupin pointed to the letter and said, "The little girl's family thank you for saving their daughter and want to invite you, Snape and Professor McGonagall, to visit their house, but perhaps Merlin saw that Ginny's experience was too pitiful. Give them a grand prize for the Weasley family to travel to Egypt this year and relax, so, we can only set the invitation time a few days before the start of Hogwarts." Professor McGonagall rejected the invitation of the Weasley family on the grounds of welcoming the freshmen. After all, those little necromancers whose parents are muggles need Professor McGonagall to visit in person to explain the admission letter of Hogwarts, otherwise it is very difficult. May be treated as a prank by those muggles. As for Snape, I don't think I would go. Based on what I know about him, that guy would rather stay in front of the cauldron and smell the pungent potion than to Weasley home as a guest. By the way, the Weasleys are very enthusiastic, you will like them. Lupin said with helplessness on his face, and said, "Little Dwarf will also travel with the Weasleys to Egypt, in order to prevent him from halfway. After escaping to a foreign country, our original plan to catch the dwarf during the summer vacation can only be readjusted. It is expected that we will start working after the basilisk incident subsides next year." Li Feng feels that the world is really strong in correcting the plot, so that he can return to the plot. Li Feng nodded and said that he would go there by then. After all, the food he eats every day is taken by creature from Hogwarts kitchen. If he can change his taste, why refuse it? And I can also ask Weasley about the flying car, by the way, to see if there is any difference between his magic modification technology and Sirius. If there is a chance, Li Feng would like to chat with Dwarf alone to see if he can get the magic that blows up half a street from the opponent's hand. After the matter was finished, Li Feng, who was about to continue to copy the characteristics of the Chinese medicinal materials of the magic amplification potion, saw Lu Ping twitchingly standing in front of the desk, as if he wanted to say but didn't know how to say it. Li Feng asked curiously, "If you have anything to say, just say it." "Ah, it's not the first day we met, I will definitely help if I can help you." Lupin rolled his eyes. "You will help, but can you not ask for benefits? The Ministry of Magic's wanted has come down. They sent Dementors to hunt down Sirius and allowed the Dementors to practice the Dementor kiss after encountering Sirius." Seeing that Lupin was not going down, Li Feng felt a little puzzled, and asked, "Just hunt down the Dementors? Are you afraid that the brainless Dementors will catch Sirius? If you worry about an accident, you let Sirius hide. It's not enough at the Black House, and Sirius will naturally be fine when you catch the Pettigrew next year." Speaking of this, Li Feng suddenly thought of something and smiled. "You don't think that the Dementors can find the old House of Black?" "Don't worry, my Dementors are very good. Even if I find the old House of Black, I will treat them as I didn't see it." "How?" "Dementors are good. That is for you. For others, people hate ghosts and hate almost." Lu Ping shook his head speechlessly, recalling that Li Feng said with a certain expression that Sirius would teach him how to transform the Fatian car's engine, and now he knows why. He had already inquired from the Ministry of Magic that the Ministry had concluded that Sirius had fled to hunt down Harry. It could be said that where Harry appeared, the Dementor would appear. It's summer vacation, and Harry has long been back in the Muggle world. The Dementors controlled by the Ministry of Magic will only appear in the streets and alleys where necromancers gather, but once school starts, the Dementors who captured Sirius will definitely be in the Ministry. Haunted near the campus under the instructions of. And what is the difference between a happy Hogwarts and a sweet cake for the Dementor? Can those Dementors who have little control over can hold back the desire to drink pleasure? In this regard, Lupin expressed the belief that Dementors can restrain instincts, and it is better to believe that Dementors are holy creatures to make people convincing. Lupin took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, and said bitterly, "I am not worried that the Dementor poses a threat to Sirius, but that the Ministry of Magic ordered the Dementor to get too close to Harry in order to hunt Sirius, causing Harry to be harmed. So I want to talk to you if I can keep the Dementors away from Harry." Hearing this, Li Feng had an inexplicable but unspeakable feeling. The Dementors in the original book really made a big impression on Harry. How come to me, the Dementors were ordered before they even appeared on the scene? "Are you away from Harry?" Touching his chin, Li Feng summoned the leader of the Dementor to visit him outside Hogwarts, and said, "What did Sirius say?" Lu Ping lamented that the person who can see the future through time is cowhide. He smiled and looked at Li Feng and said, "Didn't you already know the answer? And this is also a request from Sirius. He is willing to teach you how to modify the engine." Li Feng got up and shrunk the magic book back into his pocket. He stretched out his hand to open a portal and said, "You have also seen it. I'm currently practicing cooking potions, so I need some jinjalong to buy materials." "You see." Lu Ping said without thinking, "Yes." From the beginning, Li Feng never thought of asking for small money from Lupin or Sirius but aimed at Harry, who made Harry related to the Dementors, and he was still rich in the N generation, so Lupin responded swiftly. Instead, Li Feng was shocked and asked curiously, "Are you rich?" Lu Ping, who followed Li Feng across the portal, spread his hands and said, "I have no money, but Sirius has money." "Still have money? Isn't Jin Jalong evacuated by me?" Could it be that Sirius, with the face of the wanted criminal, ventured into Gringotts to withdraw money? This is asking for money but not life. Lu Ping saw what Li Feng was thinking, and smiled. "When do you think the Black House was built? How does it compare to the time when the Black family existed? Do you think those families who inherited the ancients would really put all their property together? They know better than you what it means not to put all their eggs in the same basket." When Li Feng came to the outside of the campus, he squinted his eyes and touched his chin, wondering when he was gathering some wool from the Black family. In the forbidden forest of Hogwarts, Li Feng chatted with Lupin while waiting for the Dementor leader to come. After a while, the two saw a dark figure in the distance flying towards them quickly. As the black shadow suddenly stopped in front of Li Feng and humbled and bowed to Li Feng, the two suddenly felt a chill swept through their bodies. Immediately, they each showed their magical powers to protect themselves from the Dementors and be affected. Li Feng glanced at the frosty and withered wild flowers beside the Dementor, and then at Lupin, who stood calmly in front of the Dementor. Li Feng is a little curious. He is not afraid of Dementors because the other party was originally his own servant, and he was taught a lot when replaying it when he received it. So now the other party does not dare to bark his teeth at all, and will only try to restrain the desire to inhale the happiness in the air. Otherwise Li Feng doesn't mind letting the other party recall what painful memories are. In addition, Li Feng could have been by the Dementor for a short time, so he could ignore the Dementor's ability, but how did Lupin do it? Lu Ping saw Li Feng's curiosity, rolled up his sleeves and let Li Feng look at the weird patterns on his arms, and said, "Remember those spells that restrained wolf poisoning? Dumbledore helped me improve and used Theluen text to make them look like the tattoo is painted on me, so now." The corner of Lupin's mouth was slightly tilted, and an excited smile appeared on his face, saying, "So now I will be weaker on the night of the full moon, but I can also choose whether to become a werewolf or not. The modified tattoo allows me to ignore some mind-distorting creatures in a short time. Unfortunately, Dementors are one of the mind-distorting creatures." Li Feng scratched his head, looked at the Lune text on Lupin's arm, and asked in confusion, "Since these spells can help you not be afraid of the Dementor's ability, why are you looking for me? It's also directly portrayed on Harry. Some are not over." Lu Ping shook his head, reluctantly opened the collar, revealing Theluen text on his chest, and said, "Do you think that only the tattoo on the arm can restrain the wolf poisoning? Wrong, I almost got Theluen tattoo on my whole body. And there are many shortcomings in portraying Luen on the body. First of all, this is a spell for restraining wolf poison. I'm not afraid that the Dementor's close-up effect is only incidental. Secondly, if Theluen text wants to exert its due effect, it needs to provide the source of magic power by itself, and Harry is just a child, his magic power it's not enough for Thesaurine texts to have the effect they should have. Even if the spell is portrayed on the crafting props for Harry to use, it will only be able to defend against Dementors for a short time due to Harry's magic problems. Ability that will exhaust magic power due to the use of props and completely lose defense." Finally, Lu Ping said quietly, "Harry is still a child, or a child who has reached a very fast development stage. Can you imagine that I will portray these spells well today, and next month will be caused by Harry growing taller or gaining weight? Is the text shapeshifting? Does the deformed Lune text still have magical effects? So these spells portrayed as the Lune text still said to Harry that it was not worth the gain." Li Feng suddenly nodded to indicate that he understood. Having said that Harry's current strength is not enough, even if he picks up the artifact, he can't exert the power that the artifact should have. You were right to understand that. Lupin explained to Li Feng while standing beside the Dementor, buttoned his collar, rubbed his hands that were beginning to chill, and handed a strand of hair that he didn't know where he got from. To Li Feng, look aside, behaved. Or the Dementor, who consciously positioned his posture as a slave and said, can we solve the problem of the Dementor first? I can't help but send this guy a roar guardian. Quote, Dementors don't have eyes. The way they recognize creatures can only be distinguished by smell and emotion, so there is no need for Lupin to explain anything. Li Feng already understands that the owner of this strand of hair must be Harry. Li Feng took the hair, turned and handed it to the Dementor, looked at Lupin contemptuously, and said, cut, I thought how long is that short time, in your mouth, but was forced to tremble by the Dementor in 3 seconds. Are you a real man in 3 seconds? Lu Ping was stunned. Although he didn't understand the meaning of 3 seconds a real man, it was obvious that Li Feng was not complimenting him. When Lu Ping rolled his eyes at Li Feng, he saw Li Feng flaunt the Dementor. The mouth that didn't make any sound. In fact, it was Li Feng commanding the Dementor in undead language, order your subordinates not to approach and harm the owner of this smell, and you must have the ability to restrain you when you encounter it. Leave the owner of this smell as soon as possible. The Dementor lowered his head and floated into Harry's hair and said, yes, my master. When the Dementor lightly sniffed Harry's hair, Li Feng suddenly had a bold idea, half joking and half seriously saying to Lupin, you said I let the Dementor go from house to search Sirius with a sign on his neck. It is stated that as long as you give money, you will not enter the house to search. How much do you think I can make? Lu Ping stared at Li Feng, who fell into Qian's eyes silently, and said, how did your brain come up with this kind of pornography? I don't know how much money you can make. Knowing that the Dementors are under your control, you don't want to go to the streets in your life, just saliva can drown you. Li Feng scratched his head. He felt that this method was quite good. As for being discovered in the future, he didn't think about it. Li Feng didn't plan to spend a lifetime in this world. He just wanted to learn magic. It's too far away for Li Feng, and it's better to think about how to improve your strength when you have that time. But Dumbledore is a big trouble, or should I rob the Death Eaters? The more he thought about it, the more reasonable Li Feng felt. He touched his chin thoughtfully. What kind of Dementors are people who hate ghosts? This is a group of my private gold troop. Lupin, how about I let the Dementors rush into the Death Eaters' house for a ransacking activity? If Li Feng wants to sack the magical world with the help of the Dementors that cannot be killed, Lupin will notify Dumbledore as soon as possible and ask Old Deng to come over and destroy Li Feng, but Li Feng only aimed at the Death Eaters. Lupin, who has always been at odds with Death Eaters, grinned and said, need help. Don't watch the number of Death Eaters in the movie, but Li Feng is really fine to remember a few. Hearing Lu Ping's words, Li Feng smiled and said, definitely, I need a list. You are responsible for collecting the hair of these people. Give the hair to this one. Wonkai, yes, this Dementor leader will be called Wonkai from now on. Let Wonkai come out for the rest of the matter, rest assured, you will be rewarded afterwards. Wang Choi. Lupin's mouth turned to look at Wang Choi, who is about to bring wealth to him, and said, not only money, but also various potions and magical knowledge. The members of the Death Eaters have inherited them for 100 years. Or a 1,000-year-old pure blood family, their collections are all good things not to be missed. Lupin paused, seeming to be planning something, and said, the plan with a sign on the Dementor's neck should be changed. We need a more concealed way to empty their home. When he said, empty, Lu Ping looked at him with a smile, and Li Feng said that he understood and had a lot of experience. Lupin wanted nothing more than to break into the Death Eaters' homes with the help of Dementors, and to force these people out of the room with his own ability to absorb happiness, so that Li Feng would open the portal and move away the good things he saw. Just like before Li Feng went to the basement of Blake's old house, it was like emptying Jin Zhelong. As for the Roar God guards of these people, Li Feng said that there is no problem that this group of Dementors cannot solve. If there is, it means that the number of Dementors is not enough and it needs to be in a group. Li Feng does not believe that hundreds of Dementors charge entering the home of these Death Eaters. It is estimated that the other party is so scared that they will not even fart, and they dare to release the Roar Guardian. You don't even need the Dementors to absorb the happiness around you, just squeeze the Death Eaters out of your home based on the number. At this moment, keeping in mind the wealth of Harry's smell, he lowered his head and floated a few steps back, preparing to pass Li Feng's order to the other Dementors. Li Feng, who shook hands with Lupin to reach a deal, turned his head and said to Wang Kai, "It is not appropriate to always call you a Dementor. From now on, your name will be Wang Kai. I will ask Lupin to contact you in a few days, and remember, the second task is very important. If you fail to do it." With a sullen face, Li Feng said word by word, "You can let your people choose a leader." Wang Kai, who couldn't resist, didn't know whether he was forced by Wang Kai's name or was afraid of Li Feng's threat. He nodded tremblingly and then turned and floated away. Lu Ping looked at Li Feng as if he had turned into a great devil, and felt that the good Wang Kai was aggrieved and fleeing away. He had a lot of insights in his heart, but he didn't know what to say for a while. Is this a Dementor? Ha ha. Lu Ping shook his head to get rid of the thoughts in his head. After saying goodbye to Li Feng, it turned into a black mist and moved away with a phantom. Seeing Lu Ping's leaving figure, Li Feng was a little envious, who hadn't let him learn how to phantom migration. Hogwarts' summer vacation was spent in Li Feng making potions and learning magic. The start of Hogwarts also marked the end of Snape's potions teaching time, and Li Feng had to learn the rest by himself. Fortunately, the basic operations of potions had been learned with Snape's help, and Li Feng had to do it. It's nothing more than practicing or burning money. Lu Ping's teaching time also ended. After all, the other party was the black magic defense professor at Hogwarts after school started, but he didn't have much time to continue teaching Li Feng. Regarding this, Li Feng expressed his discomfort. Don't look at Lupin's words that there is no time. He still wants to protect Harry in the school while giving the other side a small stove and monitoring the dwarf star by the way. This is to teach Harry the time to teach Li Feng. It's only strange that Li Feng can be happy. Near the day before school started, Li Feng specially asked Creature to select a few gifts from a pile of looted objects from the Death Eaters' homes, which were prepared for going to Weasley's home. As night fell, Li Feng carried a flat shoulder bag and opened the portal to the Broken Axe Bar. As soon as he crossed the portal, Li Feng saw a little boy with eyes staring at himself and the portal behind him dumbfounded. Li Feng, who felt that the little boy in front of him was a little familiar, asked subconsciously, "Harry Potter who survived the catastrophe?" The little boy looked curiously at the portal and the secret room behind the portal, nodded and admitted that he was a little expert in this world. Although he knew that he was in a magical world and could see all kinds of magical magic, Harry was still curious about the swirling orange light door. Especially when Harry saw Li Feng walk out of the portal, he understood that it was a kind of spatial magic. Harry said he wanted to learn it too. After he learned it, he would not have to be locked in a small room during the holidays all day. It's so cool. Good evening, sir. What kind of magic is this? Is it in the textbook? Li Feng shrugged and said with a smile, "There is no portal content in the textbook. This is my unique spell." After thinking about it, Li Feng added, "Professor McGonagall will do too, I guess Dumbledore will do too." Although in Li Feng's eyes Harry is the moving Jin Zilong, after this period of time, he almost ransacked several Death Eater families. Li Feng, who only had Jin Zilong in his pocket and no change, said that he is not bad in money or knowledge. So Harry's curious and yearning portal spells can only be thought of in his mind, and Li Feng is not interested in teaching kid magic. The simple exchange of names with Harry is considered to be a call to roar. Li Feng walked straight to the bar, put his shoulder bag aside, and said to the barkeeper who was wiping the glass, "Tom, a glass of mead, by the way, borrow your fireplace. I'm going to be a guest at Mr. Weasley's house." "Mr. Austen, long time no see," Tom said while pouring a glass of mead from the barrel. "I still remember when you came to the bar in embarrassment, but look at you now. I want to come to the one you recently visited." "Yes, made new friends in London." "Forget it, at least it's settled down now," Li Feng said with a shrug after taking the mead. "How's the business going?" After speaking, Li Feng sipped the slightly sweet mead in his hand. The alcohol content of mead is not as high as Li Feng imagined, but Li Feng did not dare to pour it into his mouth. These sweet wines have a characteristic, that is, when you feel that the taste is good, you will not consciously get drunk. When you prepare one cup after another, you will become drunk unconsciously. Tom glanced at the few drinkers in the bar, pointed to the wanted portrait of Sirius on the surrounding wall, sighed and said, "What can I do? It's all caused by the Sirius and the Dementors. Everyone likes to hide at home now, for fear that the valuable things at home will be stolen by the Dementors. I can't figure it out. What do the Dementors want these things for? Do they still want to come to me for a drink with a bunch of Jinjalong? I don't entertain these evil creatures." Li Feng grinned. He didn't want to express his opinions indiscriminately on this matter. After all, the biggest black hand was himself. To say that the Dementors steal something is purely being hit by a big pot flying from the sky. Their real job is to drive the residents out of the house. The rest are Li Feng and Lu Ping, as well as the moldy little who stays at home. Serious, the three of them frantically searched for all the things they wanted in the Death Eaters' homes. I don't know if Lu Ping deliberately selected those wealthy families from the list of Death Eaters. Anyway, Li Feng is now rich and rich regardless of whether it is Jinjalong or magic books or props and potions. On the side, Harry, who was about to eat some dinner, heard Li Feng preparing to go to Weasley's house. He glanced at Li Feng, who was a foreigner, with a slight surprise, and then looked at the wine glass in Li Feng's hand, thinking, I am idle, maybe can I go to Ron's house to play? When Mr. Austen finishes drinking, he will go to Ron's house together and surprise him. After a while, Li Feng, who was listening to Tom's nagging, finished a glass of mead, and after saying goodbye to Tom, he picked up his shoulder bag and walked towards the fireplace. When Li Feng was about to grab the shunt fan, he heard Harry's voice behind him, "Mr. Austen." Li Feng turned around questioningly and asked, "Mr. Potter, is there anything to do with me?" Harry looked at flow fans. He used this stuff, and was transported to Knockover Alley because of illegibility. If it wasn't for the luck to meet Hagrid, it would have been cool. It was also the encounter that made Harry. I gave a bad comment on the use of flow fans. It's just, while staying in the room boringly, while going to Ron's house for the last night of the holiday. How would a 13-year-old boy choose? You can guess it with your toes, and Harry is not an honest kid. Harry, I happen to be going to Weasley's house too, shall we go together? Li Feng raised his eyebrows, but he knew that Harry could enter and leave the room freely in the Broken Axe bar. In fact, it was correct to say that he was under house arrest in the bar. He did not believe that Harry was not allowed to appear on the street without being warned to avoid being caught. Sirius was slaughtered. Although Sirius wouldn't draw a knife, he would only give Harry a big hug, but no one else knew. After thinking about it, Li Feng felt that at the moment, the drunkard squatting in a corner might be the one sent by the Ministry of Magic to monitor Harry. As an unknown person without identification, Li Feng didn't want to make trouble for himself. What's more, now Sirius knows that Pettigrew is at Weasley's house. Li Feng took Harry to the Weasley's house at this time. It is estimated that Sirius and Lupin will dare to enter Mr. Weasley's house in the next second. Li Feng grabbed the flow fan on the side, with a fake apology on his face, and said, "Sorry, I think it will be more safe for you to stay in the room." Before Li Feng's words were finished, Harry swiftly grabbed the flying powder and rushed into the fireplace, and dropped the flow when he called out Weasley's address. Li Feng silently watched the green flames violently ignite in the fireplace, and then Harry disappeared before his eyes. Yes, forget this as a bear kid. Li Feng turned his head to look at Tom, whose expression was frozen, and said innocently, "Can I say that I am the Seeker in Quidditch? I can't stop this speed and agility." The corner of Tom's eyes jumped slightly to put down the wine glass in his hand that Li Feng seemed to always wipe clean, and ran to the bar building in a panic. It seemed that there was some big shot living on the second floor, which could solve the trouble caused by Harry going out privately. Li Feng scratched his head and didn't understand what Tom wanted to do. When Li Feng came to Weasley's home with a sullen face, he had already expressed no love for all the transmission methods in this world. Is there no normal transmission method? This gray body is even more non-human than Heijo non-human. It seems something is wrong. Before Li Feng drew out his magic wand to send himself a clean up, Arthur Weasley, who had been guarding the fireplace, smiled and stretched out his right hand to shake hands with the Asian-faced Li Feng. "Good evening, I think you must it's Mr. Austen, and Ginny and Dumbledore have both told me that you are an Asian traveling to London." "Good evening, Mr. Arthur Weasley, I am very glad to receive your invitation." Li Feng, who used magic to clean himself up, shook hands with Arthur Weasley and said with a smile, "Yes, I like it. Zhaoshang, the merchandise there makes me linger." When speaking, Li Feng added silently in his heart, "Especially when spending other people's money, it makes me linger." Li Feng turned his head and looked around and asked, "Mr. Weasley, have you seen Mr. Potter? He uses flow powder one step faster than me. I hope he will not run elsewhere." Weasley pointed upstairs with a nervous expression, and said, "He changed clothes upstairs. To be honest, I didn't expect Harry to go out in such a tense situation." Weasley motioned to Li Feng to order the pre-dinner wine in the restaurant on the side, and said, "I have notified Dumbledore that Harry is at my house. Express." As soon as Weasley handed the wine glass to Li Feng heard Mrs. Weasley's nervous and joyful voice from upstairs, "Don't worry, Harry, you will be safe at my house. Sirius cannot hurt you." At the moment, Harry's understanding of Sirius is limited to the fact that the other party is a murderer who escaped from Azkaban. He doesn't understand why Mrs. Weasley mentioned Sirius to hurt him. He looked blank. Asked, "Mrs. Weasley, who is Sirius and what does it have to do with me?" In the restaurant, when Weasley heard his wife telling Harry who Sirius was and why he wanted to hunt Harry, he explained to Li Feng embarrassingly, "Although the Ministry of Magic opposes me to disclose some things to Harry, I think as a party, you have the right to understand your own situation." Li Feng nodded to express his understanding. What he said was, "This also allows Harry to be more vigilant in normal times to prevent being attacked by Sirius. In my heart, I bet you, Sirius will only watch with affection." To Harry. After a while, Mrs. Weasley brought a group of children downstairs. Li Feng politely got up and said, "Good evening, Mrs. Weasley. I am very happy to taste your food." "Good evening, Mr. Austen, and welcome to my house," Mrs. Weasley said apologetically to Li Feng as she let the children sit at the table. "Sorry, I just made you wait. Dinner is ready." After speaking, Mrs. Weasley waved her magic wand in her hand, and the food cooked earlier floated to the table. Seeing that the food was on the table, Weasley picked up the wine glass, looked at Li Feng and said, "Thank you for saving Ginny. This is what I should do." Li Feng opened the dry flat shoulder bag, took out a gift, and prepared to distribute it to the children of Weasley. Except for Harry, Weasley's family had a gift. There was no way Li Feng didn't know that Harry would come too. It was normal not to prepare gifts. Harry looked at the shoulder bag with some curiosity. It was obviously a flat bag. Why did he take out so many gifts like a bottomless pit? You know, there are many children in the Weasley family. Ron, who received the gift, saw Harry's curiosity, and whispered in Harry's ear while holding Pettigrew, "That's a backpack with a non-marking curse." Ginny accepted the gift at the sign of her parents, and after saying, "Thank you," she looked at the young Li Feng curiously. In the secret room, she saw Li Feng empty-handed opening and closing the portal in the mirror space. She was born in the magical world and understood how difficult it is for a necromancer to release without a rod, and the young guy in front of her, but can release magic in the wave of hands effortlessly. Dinner took place in a pleasant atmosphere, during which Li Feng drank with Weasley and brought the topic to the flying car. Although Weasley works in the Ministry of Magic's Department of Prohibition of Muggle Supplies, he likes anything related to Muggles and is also very interested in Muggle technology. He would buy some technology products to disassemble and study in his own small shed, and sometimes he would use magic on them, including a car that could fly and be invisible after being enchanted, and Li Feng was most interested in it as the magic that allows cars to drive autonomously. Weasley heard that Li Feng was interested in his demolished car, and when he answered Li Feng's question at the beginning, there was some hesitation until he turned his attention to his wife. Mrs. Weasley, who had always opposed Weasley's magic to change the car, may be grateful to Li Feng for saving her precious daughter, or she might think that the flying car was already banned at Hogwarts last summer. Linny wandered and had nothing to do with Weasley, so the excited Weasley didn't stop the excited Weasley from talking about how he changed the flying car. Seeing that Mrs. Weasley had no clear objections, Weasley couldn't help showing off his skills with Li Feng. Even under Li Feng's guidance, Weasley explained in detail his magical reform ideas and specific operations. This made Li Feng feel that this trip was not in vain. At least after returning to the Marvel Universe, he can sleep in the RV while allowing the RV to drive automatically, avoiding accidental hits by shells or accidentally hitting the plane when the RV is resting in the air, especially it was an airplane. Li Feng said he couldn't afford it. At the end of the dinner, Li Feng and Weasley were already drunk, and they began to call each other brothers. Aside, Ginny saw that her mother was busy tidying up the dining table and her brothers were unpacking the gifts Li Feng had brought. After holding back her curiosity for a long time, she walked to Li Feng's side, ready to ask her doubts, and said, "Austin sir, thank you for saving my life." Li Feng, who felt that someone was calling himself, opened his drunk eyes and glanced at Ginny with a confused look. When he saw that it was Ginny calling himself, he smiled and said, "Ha, it's you little loli, I remember you are Harry's wife, Ginny Potter, right?" As soon as Li Feng said what he said, except for Weasley who was also drunk, Harry and Ginny looked down at the pattern on the floor with blushing faces, and everyone else looked at Li Feng who was smirking. From the bottom of her heart, Mrs. Weasley likes Harry very much. If Ginny is an adult, she doesn't mind Austin's drunkenness, but the question is how old Ginny is now. She is only a 12-year-old child, and she is talking about marriage. Is it early to marry? If it were not for Li Feng to be the guest she invited, Mrs. Weasley would really like to take the broom and talk to Li Feng. What jokes should not be made in front of the children, which will cause unnecessary trouble. Although Ron and Harry are good friends, when he thought of his sister becoming the brother's wife, how to say, he couldn't accept it, and subconsciously looked at Harry and retorted, "This is impossible." Mrs. Weasley nodded in response to Ron's question, and said, "Mr. Austin is drunk. He is talking nonsense." Harry felt that he had been in a disaster. He just wanted to take advantage of the last day of the holiday to carve. He had no other ideas. Marrying a wife was a little far away for him. Alcohol inhibits the cerebral cortex, makes you feel relaxed, or naturally releases your usual depressed emotions. Some people will be in a state of excitement, show a lot of talk, like to speak truth after drinking, love to remember the past, and be impulsive. Wait. Unfortunately, Li Feng who drank too much is now in a state of excitement and talk, so Li Feng, who was paralyzed in a chair, saw everyone's unbelieving expressions. There was only one thought in his drunken mind, "I can still lie to you. These little shit kids can't make it, especially the look you look at me makes me very upset. As for the plot, what is that stuff? Don't believe me. Tell you, I know a lot of things that you can't imagine, such as..." While talking, Li Feng snapped his fingers to display the mirror space. When everyone heard the sound of broken glass around and saw the surrounding crystal walls, Li Feng swayed up and walked in front of Ron, pointing to the field mouse in Ron's arms and yelling. Said, "Bold evil evildoer, I haven't appeared quickly in front of this master. Ron, maiden, this guy who was possessed by the monster saved my sister. I don't believe it, there must be something wrong." Little dwarf. When Mrs. Weasley saw that Li Feng had started to get drunk and yelled at her children, she cast her eyes on Weasley, who was drunk on the dining table, with unkind eyes. "You can still fall asleep at this time. Don't even want to climb onto the old lady's bed in this life." No way, since the masters are too much to drink, Mrs. Weasley can only stand up in front of Ron and say, "Mr. Austin, this joke is not funny at all. I ask you to sober up. Apologize to Ron, he is my son, not a monster." Li Feng scratched his head in confusion. Fortunately, his only thinking about ability made him react immediately. This is because Mrs. Weasley misunderstood what she meant, and hurriedly pointed to the field mouse and said, "I didn't say Ron, I mean it's the fat vole, he was made by Peter Pettigrew. The hero who has been dead for 12 years. How can it be?" Before Mrs. Weasley could refute, Li Feng collapsed with the suspected water polo time stagnation spell in his right hand, and used his mental power to firmly lock Little Dwarf, and said sharply, "Little Dwarf, you want to become a tuft of roasted voles buried in the belly of an owl. Or become a person sleeping in the grave." If it weren't for Mrs. Weasley to keep Ron behind her, Li Feng would not say anything about hitting Pettigrew, and now he can't even hit Ron, otherwise he really wants to imprison Ron and Pettigrew together in time stagnation. In the spell, it's just time stagnation, and it's not a destructive spell. It's a big deal to apologize to Ron afterwards, kid, as long as the gift is in place, any enmity can be resolved. Mrs. Weasley saw that Li Feng had neither a wand nor recite the spell when she cast the spell, so she directly cast a ball of water. She regretted inviting Li Feng to be a guest at home. If possible, she really wanted to use the time converter to go back to the past and stop the past. Write an invitation letter to Li Feng yourself. If the time converter can't go back to the long past, it's okay to stop Li Feng from drinking. The province is going crazy here. Seeing that Li Feng was holding a water polo and shooting it when looking for an opportunity, Mrs. Weasley naturally unceremoniously drew out her wand and pointed it at Li Feng, protecting the panicked children behind her by the way. Before Mrs. Weasley spoke to warn Li Feng to disarm the magic, the dwarf in Ron knew that his identity had been exposed, especially Li Feng, who was in a drunk state, had no mercy in his eyes, and only grabbed him to prove that he did not lie. Determined, little dwarf feels that he will be the owl's ration without running away. Who makes drunk people really unable to communicate? Thinking of this, little dwarf hurriedly jumped to the ground after taking a bite from Ron and preparing to escape. It's okay for the dwarf not to leave Ron. Since the other party ran out of Mrs. Weasley's protection circle in a panic, Li Feng didn't know what politeness was, and grinned and shot the time spell in his hand at the little dwarf that was locked by mental power. Just as the water polo wrapped the Pettigrew and kept it running on the floor like a joke, a portal suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Li Feng turned his head and glanced at Dumbledore, who came out of the portal, smiled at Harry, and said, "Look, I said that Comrade Dang will also portal. I didn't lie to you." Mrs. Weasley was relieved to see that it was Dumbledore. When she was about to say something, she saw Dumbledore wave and said, "I'll explain it to you later." After speaking, Dumbledore surrounded the small dwarf star wrapped in water with great interest, and then looked at the surrounding space crystal walls. After a while, he smiled and said to Li Feng, "Perfect battlefield, will you open the portal? For people like this is a sealed tomb, and even if you kill you can't escape from this alien space. Also, I can't help but want to compliment you. It's a very good time spell." Dumbledore blinked and asked curiously, "Are time and space your best spell?" Feeling thirsty after drinking too much wine, Li Feng grabbed the bottle on the table and poured it into his mouth. Hearing Dumbledore complimenting himself, he couldn't help but give Dumbledore a thumbs up, saying, "You really have eyes. Yes, time and space are one of my best spells." It's just that before Li Feng put down the bottle, Li Feng, who had been drinking too much for a long time, and drank a little when he just quenched his thirst, caused the alcohol to quickly occupy the brain, and he collapsed to the ground without saying a word. On the side, Mrs. Weasley was full of doubts, especially when she knew that the water ball in Li Feng's hand was a time-type spell. She was even more surprised to close her mouth from ear to ear, looking at Li Feng, who was collapsing on the ground and snoring like a monster. It's not that necromancers in the magical world don't want to learn about time spells, but so far I haven't heard of anyone who can control time. Why can young Li Feng control time? Dumbledore, Mrs. Weasley asked, looking at the field mouse about to break free from the spell of time. What the hell is going on? Dumbledore's perception that the mirrored space that had been lost due to Li Feng's drunkenness was about to shatter, so he drew out his wand and petrified the small dwarf star and opened the portal while floating Weasley and Li Feng in the air, saying, "It's not safe here. Place, I will explain to you after leaving the mirror space." When everyone left the mirror space, Dumbledore waved his wand at Pettigrew, returning it to its human form. Seeing the voles become unfamiliar makes your Mrs. Weasley a little confused. Although she can't recognize the tattered guy in front of her at a glance, everyone knows that this guy is an illegal animagus. Regardless of whether the guy in front of him is the little dwarf in Li Feng's mouth, Mrs. Weasley just thinks that the other party has been hiding in her house for 12 years, and she feels that a wave of cold follows her spine and hits the sky. We must know that when humans do certain shy things, they will subconsciously avoid children, but I have never heard of anyone avoiding a pet, so Mrs. Weasley, who feels that her brain is about to explode, is ashamed and angry. Asked, "Dumbledore, for Merlin's sake, tell me what's going on." Dumbledore, who was sure that Pettigrew had been controlled, heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "I will explain it to you now." In the early morning, when the hot summer sun shone on Li Feng's face through the glass window, Li Feng tried to open his eyelids and turned over to avoid the sun. It's a pity that Li Feng, who was sleepy with a hangover and sleepy, forgot that at the moment, he was not lying on his own bed, but was placed on the sofa in the living room by Mrs. Weasley. Therefore, Li Feng's subconscious turning over caused him to fall directly to the ground, still face The kind of court. Li Feng, who stumbled inexplicably, finally opened his eyelids, scratched his head and looked around, subconsciously preparing to ask Creature to pour water for himself. The strange environment caught him stunned, and the corner of his mouth abruptly summoned Creature to say something to him. Swallow it back. Under what circumstances? Why am I still at Weasley's home? Sitting back on the sofa, Li Feng rubbed his swollen head. After thinking about it for a long time, he didn't remember what he experienced last night. He only knew that he was now weak and died of thirst without drinking water. On the side, Mrs. Weasley, who had been busy with breakfast in the kitchen, saw Li Feng sitting on the sofa rubbing his temples. She pulled out her magic wand and pointed to the teacup, letting the teacup float in front of Li Feng, and said with a smile, "Mr. Austen, good morning." Li Feng took the teacup and said, "Good morning," and drank the warm water in the teacup. He stood up and put the teacup on the dining table, and said with a hooded look, "Mrs. Weasley, yesterday I didn't talk nonsense late, did I? Sorry, I'm a person who drank too much or liked to talk nonsense. I hope it didn't cause you trouble." Mrs. West frowned and said with a smile, "Trouble? Maybe I should thank you for helping me solve hidden dangers at home." Li Feng, who didn't understand what it meant, scratched his head and asked inexplicably, "Ah, what did I do?" "Peter, little dwarf," Mrs. Weasley said as she handed a sandwich to Li Feng, "I can't believe that my pet voles, which I have raised for 12 years, are actually a murderer. I thought about it. This is not shuddering." While speaking, Mrs. Weasley rubbed her arms with her arms around her arms. Obviously, one night was not enough to ease her from the incident. Li Feng listened to Mrs. Weasley's intermittent description while eating the sandwich. When he stuffed the sandwich into his stomach, Li Feng could be considered to understand what he did last night. "Are you saying that Dumbledore took Dwarf away? You also know that Sirius was wronged, and Harry also knows that he has a godfather." Mrs. Weasley smiled and nodded. Now, Li Feng felt that his brain hurts even more. Harry's plot this year is probably scrapped. It's nothing. Anyway, I don't want to participate, but why did I catch Little Dwarf? Isn't it good to work quietly? Now it's good. The magic that exploded half a street was released by myself. After having breakfast, Li Feng sat on the sofa with a cup of tea and looked badly on the sofa to reflect that he shouldn't have made a mistake after drinking. In the kitchen, Mrs. Weasley accidentally saw Li Feng's back. For some reason, a weird feeling suddenly appeared in her heart. Looking at it from side to side, she felt that Li Feng's back was indescribably desolate. Mrs. Weasley shook her head, threw this weird feeling into her head, and shouted at the bedroom on the second floor, "Weasley, children, get up and have breakfast. We will go to the Broken Axe bar to get it later. Harry's textbook, you won't be able to catch the Hogwarts train if it's too late." Mrs. Weasley's loud voice also brought Li Feng back to his senses. After drinking the tea in her hand, she comforted herself helplessly. What else can I do if the dwarf has been taken away by Dumbledore? Come on, let's concentrate on practicing my almanac. By the way, Harry's world has to get off the Hogwarts Express. Thinking of this, Li Feng rubbed his face, rubbed his unhappy expression into a happy expression, got up and put the teacup on the table and said, "Mrs. Weasley, thank you for your hospitality. I'll leave first." Mrs. Weasley had an apologetic face. When she wanted to come last night, it was not only Li Feng but also Weasley who was drunk, but now Li Feng as a guest is going to leave, and her husband is still lying on the bed. Roar. Sleep, this is somewhat unreasonable. I'll let Weasley send you off, after all you are not familiar with London. Li Feng thought for a while, picked up his shoulder bag and said, "Thank you for your kindness. I can use flow powder to go to the Poax bar. You should let Mr. Weasley sleep more. I hope he won't be at work today. I'll breathe." Mrs. Weasley thought for a while, and felt that what Li Feng said was somewhat reasonable. After all, people with hangovers have no mental work if they haven't rested well. Now the family's income depends on Weasley, who works at the Ministry of Magic. They were dismissed from public office due to work errors due to a good rest, and their family was out of food. Mrs. Weasley nodded slightly and apologized to Li Feng to use the shunt fan. From the fireplace, Li Feng came to the Broken Axe bar, then via the night bus to King's Cross Station, and crossed the 9 3/4 platform to board the Hogwarts train. Perhaps Li Feng came a little early, and there were only a few students on the train. Li Feng, who was so sleepy, walked straight to the last carriage, preparing to find the interval to squint and watch the scenery on the road while the train was running. At the moment, Lu Ping, who was going to Hogwarts as a professor of black magic defense, happened to be in the last car. Lu Ping was a little surprised when he saw Li Feng. Before asking why Li Feng chose to take a train instead of using a portal, Li Feng saw that Lu Ping, who had eye bags and panda-like eyes, had already laughed and said jokingly, "You what kind of look? It's very unique. If you weren't wearing clothes, I would have thought you were a panda from the zoo." Seeing that Lu Ping was still wearing patched clothes, Li Feng couldn't help but smile. "Speaking of which, you have made a lot of money recently, why are you not willing to buy yourself a piece of clothing? Or do you have any special hobbies and likes?" Wearing patched clothes. Lu Ping rolled his eyes at Li Feng, and after looking around, he opened an empty compartment and motioned for Li Feng to enter the compartment together and talk. Li Feng walked into the compartment with his feet before Lu Ping closed the compartment door and shrugged. "People in the magical world know that I am poor. Buying new clothes rashly will cause unnecessary suspicion. I will wait until the Dementor's stealing incident has subsided. Buying some items." Lu Ping pointed at the dark circles on his face while sitting next to Li Feng, and said helplessly, "As for this, it's all thanks to you. I didn't rest all night." Toss. Li Feng twitched his mouth, waved his hand and said, "What you said is very ambiguous. I was drinking at Weasley's last night, so don't rely on me for everything." Lupin, who understood the meaning of Li Feng's words, pinched the bridge of his nose to relieve his fatigue, and said silently, "Where did you want to go?" "I mean, you caught the little dwarf star. I was busy in the old black house in the middle of the night last night." "Interrogate him." "What did you ask?" Li Feng, who was drowsy again, rubbed his temples, closed his eyes and said, "You have to look at the little dwarf star. As far as I know, that guy is very cunning, and he can slip away at the first opportunity." Quote, "Thank you for your reminder, but," Lupin said bitterly and depressedly. In the early morning, Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts to welcome this year's freshman enrollment, but I didn't expect it to. Sirius has such a deep hatred for Pettigrew. When I was watching Pettigrew in the middle of the night, Sirius actually found an excuse to deceive me and prepared to kill Pettigrew. As a result, I don't know what Pettigrew did. When he arrived, he actually took the opportunity to run away. Considering that Sirius is inconvenient to appear on the street, I can only look for the figure of dwarfs all over the world by myself. It's a pity. There is no need for Lupin to continue. Li Feng has guessed that the other party did not catch the small dwarf star, so he sighed, and Li Feng sighed, "It's worthy of being a rat. This escape technique, nothing to say, is absolutely top-notch." Lu Ping shrugged awkwardly and helplessly, not knowing how to answer Li Feng's sigh. For a while, the two people in the carriage didn't know what to say. After a long sigh, Lu Ping draped his coat as a quilt in front of him, leaning on the seat to get asleep. As for the petty dwarf, what else can he do now? Blaming Li Feng for rashly sabotaging their previous custom-made plan that can not only capture the dwarf, but also remove the suspected murder of Sirius. This is too far-fetched. After all, Pettigrew escaped in their hands. Fortunately, after Lupin's interrogation, he somewhat pried some evidence from Dwarf's mouth, but before the evidence was collected, he could only wrong Sirius for staying in the Black House for a while. Seeing Lu Ping's posture that he would sleep in the sky, he guessed that the result of the other party staying up late for interrogation was not a waste of work. After thinking about it, Li Feng followed Lu Ping's appearance and took out his coat from his shoulder bag and covered it. Cover your face from the dazzling sunlight, leaning on the back of the chair and closing your eyes to sleep. On the other side, Mrs. Weasley brought a group of children to the Broken Axe bar, packed up the textbooks and changes of clothes that Harry left in the room, and hurriedly rushed to 9 and 4 with Hermione, who was waiting for everyone in the bar. One part of the platform almost pinched the starting time of the train to send the children on the train. On the train, Harry, Ron and Hermione's Audio-Technica looked at the passing compartments either full of people or only 1 or 2 seats. They had no choice but to continue looking for a compartment that could seat 3 people. After a while, the 3 of them walked to the cubicle where Li Feng and Lupin slept. They looked at the 2 sleeping side by side. The 3 of them thought about it and found it hard to find a cubicle with enough seats. They didn't want to miss it easily. The big deal is that 3 people sit in a row and squeeze. After entering the cubicle, Harry closed the door and said to Hermione excitedly, "You know, I still have my family, it's my godfather." I don't know if Harry was too excited or he didn't know how to tell what happened. In addition, Ron was on the scene last night. He also knew what happened. He interjected with excitement from time to time. Even though the two of them were telling what happened last night. It happened, but Hermione heard it in a cloud. After a long time, Hermione finally sorted out the main points from the two excited and messy sentences, and understood how Sirius was wronged by Dwarf, and why he was imprisoned in Azkaban without trial, and the real murderer was actually Ron's pet Waited, and then Hermione said with a bewildered face, what was the situation? Is there no justice in the magic world? After Harry and Ron's personal emotional description, Hermione can be considered to have a deep understanding of what the Ministry of Magic has done. It can be said that she is extremely disappointed with the government of the Wizarding world, especially when she thinks of the judicial process in the Wizarding world. What's the effect of a joke like law? If this is in the Muggle world, once the media finds that someone is put in jail without trial, courts, police and other law enforcement agencies, just wait to receive letters from lawyers like snowflakes, don't sue you, swear not to give up until the bankruptcy. When Hermione digested the messy information and wanted to inquire about the details of something, the Hogwarts train didn't know what had happened, and suddenly stopped halfway. Ron, who was sitting by the window, looked out the window, seeming to find something, and said, "There seems to be something outside." As soon as the voice fell, the lights in the compartment flickered for no reason, and then the train shook for a while, and the three of them felt as if someone was forcibly boarding the train. Soon, the three people noticed a sudden drop in the temperature inside the carriage. When the train shook violently again, Harry looked through the glass on the compartment door and noticed a dark figure about to open the compartment. As a crusted palm opened the compartment door, Harry, who was cold and stiff, was horrified to see a black figure whose whole body had been soaked in blisters appeared in front of him. In fact, when the poor Dementor opened the compartment door, he was more frightened than Harry. He opened the compartment door and smelled something. In addition to smelling Harry, who the leader ordered not to approach, he also smelled that his master was sleeping in the cubicle. Especially the latter, this is going to kill him. The poor Dementor remembered the scene where he was exposed to the false angel's feathers, and suddenly felt that Ice's hands and feet were cold, his whole body was cold, and his soul was flying. Even if Li Feng is disturbed by sleep, there is no such thing as getting up, but the poor Dementor has already made up for himself and will definitely be peeled off by his own leader as a warning when he leaves the train. He was very entangled, and wanted to ask his own leader what he should do now. So, who did I provoke? Why is it my turn to search this car? Li Feng originally thought about enjoying the beautiful scenery all the way after the train started, but he forgot that the train would shake slightly when it was running. These shaking not only failed to wake up Li Feng, but put him in the cradle, which directly caused Li Feng to sleep more soundly. Until now, when a large number of Dementors boarded the train, the temperature in the compartment dropped rapidly, and Li Feng, who had been awakened from freezing, slowly opened his sleepy eyes. Li Feng lifted the coat covering his head, glanced at the Dementor standing outside the cubicle at a loss, and blinked inexplicably. "Ma Dan, I said how good summer suddenly turned into winter." Li Feng, whose dream was interrupted, immediately yelled at the Dementor in an angry tone, "Close the door, and get rid of it smoothly." After shouting, Li Feng saw that the Dementor was still standing there stupidly, scratching his head in doubt. "What's the situation? Why didn't you listen to the order? Do you want me to invite you to dinner or do you want to rebel?" On the side, Lu Ping, who was sleeping Zhengxiang, was awakened by the sound of Li Feng's sudden anger against the Dementor. When he opened his eyes and saw that there was a Dementor in addition to the three children in the compartment, he subconsciously got up and drew out his wand to release the Roar Guardian. Without waiting for Lupin to cast the spell successfully, Li Feng, with his brain on, suddenly remembered that the language of the Dementors was a bit special. How can I order them when I speak human words? Especially this thing doesn't understand human words. Li Feng pulled Lupin with a look of embarrassment, and signaled that he had something to say and don't move his hands or feet. Lu Ping was taken aback when he saw Li Feng preventing him from casting a spell, and then he thought that the Dementor was Li Feng's servant. Lu Ping glanced at Harry and the others who were paralyzed in the seat, and made sure that the suspected Dementor in front of him did not hurt the three students. When he thought about beating the dog, he had to look at the owner. He had some friendship with Li Feng. It's better to leave the other side a little face. Thinking of this, Lu Ping rolled his eyes at Li Feng, retracted his wand and sat back in his seat, while using his eyes to signal Li Feng to quickly let the Dementor leave. Li Feng smiled happily, and hurriedly used undead words to order the Dementor to go away again. Hearing that Li Feng didn't punish himself, but just left, he hurriedly closed the compartment door at the fastest speed in his life, and turned to leave like an escape. After a while, the Dementors on the entire train knew that their boss was sleeping in the car, and they executed Li Feng's order to make them mellow at the fastest speed. When Li Feng lifted his jacket and ordered the Dementor, Harry and Ron had recognized Li Feng. The thought of seeing and hearing Dumbledore praise Li Feng's time spells in front of them last night suddenly made the two of them suddenly there is a feeling of finding a backer. Especially seeing Li Feng's magic is useless, just a sigh of rebuke made the shadow leave the train obediently, and it made several people feel a lot easier. Mr. Austen, are you going to Hogwarts, too? Harry rubbed his arms to keep warm, while looking at the Dementor going away through the car window, curiously asked, what was that just now? Lupin was lying on the car window watching the Dementor's leaving figure, and when he heard Harry's question, he turned his head and said, that's the Dementor, the guard of Azkaban. They are hunting Sirius. Harry, who has always longed for family care, learned the truth through Dumbledore's narration last night. Although he has never seen Sirius the Godfather, he has already regarded Sirius as his family in his heart. He heard Lupin's words. When Sirius was a wanted criminal, he retorted without thinking, but Sirius was wrong. The real murderer is. Halfway through, Harry suddenly remembered that although he knew the truth, even Dumbledore had no evidence to clear Sirius' suspicion. How could he convince the stranger in front of him to believe him? Harry looked at Li Feng, hoping that Li Feng would help him say something to prove that Sirius was wrong. After all, Li Feng was the one who found Dwarf, and he must know the truth. Lupin was stunned when he heard Harry's rebuttal. He thought, under normal circumstances, no one would excuse Sirius who had been convicted by the Ministry of Magic. Seeing Harry looking at Li Feng as if he was helping, Lu Ping first looked at Harry's small face with a suspicious look, and when he saw Harry's face as handsome as his father James, he realized, well, it's not. Harry Potter, why would I mention Sirius? No way, how did Harry know that Sirius was wrong? When Lupin recognized Harry and squinted at Li Feng first looked down at his clothes in doubt, then thought of what Lupin was thinking, shrugged and said, look at me, I drank fragments last night. If you don't believe me, you can ask the little red-haired Mr. Weasley, the wine I drank at his house last night. How do I know how Harry knew about Sirius? Ron, who was a crowd-eating melon, heard Li Feng call Roar that Roar was a little red-haired Weasley. Although his face was a little uncomfortable, he nodded honestly and said, Dumbledore told Harry about Sirius. Dumbledore just arrived when Mr. Austen used time spells to control the dwarf last night. At that time, Ron looked at Li Feng, and he wanted to laugh and found it impolite to laugh, and said, when Dumbledore explained the story, I was sure that Mr. Austen was drunk and snored on the ground. Lupin nodded a bit to show that he knew it. Seeing Harry was still a little trembling, Lupin took out the chocolate from his pocket and handed it to Harry, saying, you will feel better if you eat it. After speaking, Lu Ping looked at Li Feng angrily and said, how did you agree? Li Feng understood that Lupin was referring to what he had promised not to let the Dementors approach and hurt Harry, but I really didn't take the money and don't do things. Feeling wronged, Li Feng looked at Harry speechlessly. The ghost knew that Harry reacted so much to the Dementor. But in the plot, Harry was unconscious once he saw the Dementor. Now Harry is not unconscious yet. The Dementor is strictly implementing his orders, right? But how did Li Feng explain this? Said Harry would have been in a coma, but now he is just frightened. I'm afraid that no matter how Li Feng explains it, Lu Ping will not believe it. He will only think that Li Feng is shirking responsibility. After spreading his hands, Li Feng, who couldn't explain it, glanced at the dim and rainy sky outside the car window. Since it's all this time, Li Feng watched the woolen scenery and went straight back to the secret room to practice magic. Li Feng picked up his shoulder bag and said, I'm leaving first, and come to my site to play when I have time. After speaking, Li Feng opened the portal in the eyes of everyone and returned to the secret room. One night a few days later, the moldy Sirius in the old house couldn't help but want to see Harry, so he wrote a letter to Li Feng. After reading the letter, Li Feng felt that Sirius was really good at playing, and he actually asked him to open the portal to take the other party's luggage into the secret room. Not only would he be a company with Li Feng, he would save him by staying in the old house boringly, but also let Harry from time to time. When they arrived in the secret room, the two sat at the tea table, drinking tea and chatting, and by the way taught Harry's magic. As for the Dementors, Sirius also mentioned in the letter that he understood, and said that he had explained the reasons to Lupin. After all, he had been in Azkaban for 12 years and was very familiar with Dementors. The ghost did not hurt Harry on the train. At the beginning, Li Feng just didn't read this letter. After all, where is the relationship between the two of them? They emptied Jinjiang, copied all the books in the Blake's old house, and also asked for a small symbol of the Blake family's aristocratic heritage. Elves, it's only strange that the two of them have a good relationship with each other. Only in the following few days, apart from sending 8 letters to Li Feng urging Li Feng to open the portal every day, Sirius also asked Lupin to come to the door to communicate. In the end, Sirius almost made Dumbledore come and talk to Li Feng. Li Feng, who had been annoyed for a few days, said that he was gone and could only comfort himself. Sirius came to the secret room not only to relieve his boredom, but also to learn something along the way while teaching Harry. What a thing, what is this? Opening the portal to Black's old house, before Li Feng crossed the portal, he saw Sirius sitting on a pile of luggage with an expression of, "I'll wait until the flowers are gone." Seeing the portal opened, Sirius got up and walked into the secret room with his luggage. He threw the luggage to Creature. He looked at Li Feng and said, "I'm still thinking about you coming to pick me up. By the way, let your housekeeper help I put up the tent, and we will be neighbors from now on." At the beginning, Li Feng was only annoyed by Sirius and couldn't make him his neighbor, but when Li Feng calmed down and thought about the whole thing, something was wrong. Sirius may have something to do with Harry's move to the secret room, but it is more likely to be monitoring Li Feng. I often see Harry when I think about it, so let Harry come to the secret room directly, and then Li Feng can help open the door. Why is it necessary to move? The more he thought about it, the more something went wrong. Li Feng passed through some cobweb horse trails and found that behind his neighbors with Sirius, he could vaguely see Dumbledore's shadow. Li Feng guessed that Dumbledore was not at ease with himself. This was not Li Feng's guessing out of thin air. There were more reasons behind it. The first is the problem of his own mana attributes that Dumbledore is likely to know, plus his own portal is not even the prohibition of Hogwarts, and finally there is a lot of magic that he has found from the Death Eater's home. I don't know what this group of Death Eaters thought. Anyway, most of the knowledge that Li Feng searched was related to black magic. As the principal of Hogwarts, can Dumbledore agree to a guy who is obviously biased towards black necromancer and wandering around the school after learning a lot of black magic? Obviously impossible. As for driving Li Feng out of Hogwarts, Dumbledore has learned the portal. He knows what kind of ability Li Feng has. It is estimated that Li Feng had just been driven out of the school this morning, and in the blink of an eye, Li Feng would quietly return to the school, hiding in a corner and continuing to enjoy this geomantic treasure with a high concentration of magic power. Compared to Li Feng hiding in the dark, it is better to let Li Feng be on the bright side. At least with Sirius's surveillance, Dumbledore can know for the first time if Li Feng is in trouble. Li Feng understood, but didn't say anything. The surveillance was just surveillance. He didn't do anything bad. He was talking about it. Li Feng really wanted to do something. Sirius could stop him. It's not that Li Feng is boasting, no one can stop him when he wants to go, nor can Dumbledore. On the first weekend of becoming Li Feng's neighbor, Sirius got up just after the sun rose for an unprecedented time, and borrowed Creature from Li Feng to take care of the slightly worn tent. After that, wearing a decent formal dress, I would stand beside Li Feng feeling bored for a while watching Li Feng practice boiling potions in front of the cauldron. At the beginning, Li Feng asked Sirius curiously, "What day is it today, wearing such a bag?" Sirius did not answer Li Feng's question, but just grinned. When Li Feng saw Sirius not answering, he was lazy to deal with each other, especially when he saw Sirius's face from time to time showing nervousness and then smirking. Li Feng only treated Sirius for convulsions or endocrine disorders. It was not until noon that Lupin brought Harry, Ron, and Hermione to the secret room to rush the door, and Li Feng understood what Sirius was doing in formal clothes. See Harry when he saw Harry, or if it was so grand, he had to set off a salute to greet Harry. Bar. Harry was a little nervous and hesitant when he entered the secret room. He didn't know how this unmasked godfather's attitude towards him would compare to his Muggle-identified uncle and aunt. You must know that he had never received the care of his uncle and aunt. Sirius also hated Harry's words, and Harry felt that he should jump into the chocolate pool and have a big meal and use sweets to ease his feelings of loss. Sirius seemed to see that Harry was just as nervous as he was, and smiled his most charming smile, squatting halfway in front of Harry with his arms wide open, trying to give Harry a hug. Obviously, Sirius' actions made Harry very happy, knowing that this handsome godfather was completely different from his uncle and aunt. Seeing that the two of them were embracing each other full of affection, Li Feng curled his lips and lowered his head to stir the potion in front of him. On the side, Hermione saw that Harry, who saw the godfather, had a lot to tell Sirius, and pulled Ron, who wanted to confess to Sirius. Roar joined the fun. She consciously followed Lupin and walked to the side of Li Feng, curious. Looking at the potion in the cauldron. As the knowledge all lady in Snape's mouth, Hermione only glanced at the medicinal residues on the laboratory table, and found that Li Feng's treatment of medicinal materials was different from the description in the textbook, which made Hermione a little puzzled. Isn't potions a delicate subject? It can be seen from a clear eye that Li Feng's operation is not in accordance with the teaching in the textbook, but how to make a potion that is surprisingly high in quality. From Ron's mouth, Hermione already knew that Li Feng was very good in certain magic, and her little head not only wondered, is it possible that this is also a hidden potion master? But why does the other party live underground in Hogwarts? Li Feng glanced at Hermione with a puzzled expression, feeling that this little loli is very cute, but... Li Feng looked at Ron with freckles next to Hermione. He thought that such a cute little loli would eventually be arched by this red-haired pig. He was suddenly upset. How did Hermione like Ron in the first place? There is absolutely no reason. Li Feng, who had a good impression of Hermione when she first watched the movie, couldn't help but imagine, counting the time, his own would have taken off his diapers a long time ago, or tie Hermione back to the Marvel world and wait for him to go home. By the way, take Hermione home and let her be her own daughter-in-law. It feels a little bit when I think that my daughter-in-law is a necromancer. At the side, Lu Ping saw Li Feng staring at Hermione, whose thoughts were diverging, and he shamefully exposed Brother Pig's face. He always felt that Li Feng was thinking about something bad, so he interrupted Li Feng's fantasies aloud. Oh. Sting, Sirius explained to me that Harry was frightened by a Dementor on the train. I misunderstood you. I solemnly apologize to you now. Li Feng retracted his divergent thoughts, curled his eyes and hands to Lupin, curled the corners of his mouth, and said disdainfully, I don't see your sincerity. Lu Ping, who knows enough about Li Feng, couldn't guess what Li Feng wanted, and said, what do you want? Say it in advance, I don't have any possessions. The corner of Li Feng's mouth curled up slightly, and he smiled, I don't want your things. Just borrow some books for me from the Hogwarts library. You are now a professor at Hogwarts. Borrowing books is good for you. It's as easy as eating and drinking. Lu Ping was stunned. When he taught Li Feng before, he knew that Li Shengming sneaked into the library to copy books in the middle of the night. Why are you not satisfied with copying in the library now, and are you ready to take back the secret room for a copy? Li Feng saw Lu Ping's doubts, and helplessly explained, Filch and his cat recently noticed an abnormality in the library in the middle of the night. He made him go to the library almost every half an hour. It hurts me now. I have been copying books with the mirror space open. When he was a student, he played peek-a-boo with Filch, especially Lupin. He understood Li Feng's mood at the moment and showed a very pleased expression. He couldn't help but smile. Well, I'll borrow a few books for you every day. Book, then let your owl come to my dorm to pick up the book in the middle of the night. Or open the portal and run by yourself. Li Feng thought for a while, and said, let's go there for yourself. By the way, you can have a late-night snack in your bedroom. Lu Ping, your problem of being cheap is not cured. After listening to the conversation between the two, Hermione felt that the amount of information was a bit too large, and she couldn't accept it for a while, and couldn't help but ask, Mr. Austen, does Professor Dumbledore know that you are hiding in Hogwarts? Li Feng raised his brows and curled his lips and said, I know, he took a lot of benefits from me before agreeing not to report on me. Pointing to Sirius in the distance, Li Feng continued, see, Dumbledore still let me, that guy is watching me. Lupin rolled his eyes and sneered. Don't listen to him, he gets more benefits than Dumbledore's benefits. Lu Ping seemed to think of something. He rolled his eyes and said, now there are 3 other children who know you are hiding here. Do you want to give some gifts to cover their mouths? Hearing Lupin's naked blackmail, Hermione and Ron looked at each other. Although they knew it was Lupin's kindness, they both felt that they were not familiar with Li Feng, and the unexpected benefits were somewhat embarrassing. When the two wanted to refuse, Lupin smiled and said to the 2 of them, I'm joking with Austen, but he does have bad things. Are you sure you don't want to see if the meeting gift is rejecting? Feng Li definitely knew that Lupin was joking, and what if Hermione and Ron went to report on themselves? Li Feng patted his butt and changed his hiding place. Dumbledore is different. It is estimated that he will be busy turning Hogwarts over to find Li Feng, so Dumbledore will protect Li Feng in a sense. Li Feng was safely monitored by Sirius in the secret room. Li Feng scratched his head and thought about what gift to give to the 2 children. He turned to the tent and shouted, Creature, bring the Half-Blood Prince's textbook. As soon as he finished speaking, Creature handed Li Feng a dilapidated textbook with both hands. Without saying a word of nonsense, he turned and returned to the tent. Lupin frowned and looked at Creature. He felt that Creature was a little different from before. Li Feng handed the textbook to Hermione and said with a smile, this is your hush money. This is a textbook about potions. There is also a powerful magic on it. Since you like books, I will give it to you. In fact, Hermione wanted to reject Li Feng's benefits at first, but when he heard that Li Feng gave herself a textbook, she was a little hesitation. Who made her a good kid who loves knowledge? Especially when she heard that this was a potion textbook, and there was a magic on it that even Li Feng said was good. Hermione immediately put the hesitation behind her, took the textbook and said, thank you. Then, Li Feng looked at Ron with a look of expectation, touched his chin and said while thinking, I only know that you like necromancer chess and Quidditch. I really can't think of it for a while. Halfway through the conversation, Li Feng suddenly saw his owl. At the beginning, Li Feng bought the owl to convey news, but after Li Feng moved to the secret room, he discovered that his own owl either ate or slept. He hadn't sent a few letters at all. He always opened the portal and ran away in person. This thing was bought for nothing. After thinking about it, Li Feng pointed to the owl with the big-eared bat bloodline and said, do you like that stuff? I gave it to you. Ron glanced at Hermione, who was already flipping through the textbook, and then at the owl in the distance. To be honest, Ron liked this owl, and it was his own owl, and said shyly, thank you Mr. Austen, I like it very much. After Li Feng finished distributing the gifts, Lupin asked curiously, Creature seems to have changed a lot. Creature liked to talk to himself and abuse others at the time. Perhaps it was related to the birth environment or age, but the Horcrux locket that can only seduce people definitely has an inescapable responsibility. Whoever lets Creature is okay, just hang around. The locket wandered around, wondering how to ruin the locket. It's no wonder that Voldemort in the locket didn't drive Creature crazy. But after Li Feng followed, Creature not only couldn't touch the locket, but from time to time, Li Feng used healing techniques to heal his body and purify his slightly distorted mind. Even if Li Feng's spells were only half as effective as the orthodox white necromancer, they were also if you can't hold Li Feng, let's put a spell on him. Therefore, Li Feng has spent a lot of time on Creature. If Creature's age is not an irreversible problem, it is estimated that Creature has returned to normal now. How can he occasionally get nervous like this? Seeing that Lupin was curious about Creature's transformation, Li Feng roughly talked about his treatment of Creature, and smiled, it's pretty good now, it's not like buzzing in my ears all day long. Lu Ping nodded, indicating that he understood. He is someone who knows Li Feng's path, and he understands that the treatment methods in his hands come from other worlds, some of which are even incomprehensible to him, just like the Key of Solomon. As long as a person who believes in God holds and chants a spell, he can be restrained to the death of a werewolf, which makes him never understand how ordinary people without magic do it. On the side, Ron was listening in the clouds, and Hermione was hearing something. In Hermione's perception, Whether it is magic or potion, it is only purely healing physical wounds. She said that she had never heard of spells that can heal the soul, otherwise those who were tortured by Death Eaters went crazy and sent them in. The people at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries and Injuries have not been discharged early. Hermione, who became more and more mysterious about Li Feng, asked curiously, "Mr. Austen, can you heal the soul with a spell?" "It's purification." Li Feng shook his head, and said, "I'm just purifying creatures' slightly distorted mind." "Definitely, if you think that, forgetting nothing, removing the bad memory of the other party is also a healing word, then I dare to nod and seize." Lu Ping curled the corners of his mouth slightly, disdainfully said, "According to you, I can heal the trauma of the soul, and my craft is much better than you." Hermione was really interested in purification, and blinked her bright eyes and asked, "Can I learn it?" "Definitely. Li Feng doesn't care about it. The little girl can learn if she wants to learn it. It's just a purification technique, and it's not a big deal." With the natural goodwill bonus, Li Feng happily took out the magic book and handed it to Hermione. "You can transcribe the spells and take them back to understand for yourself, or you can come to the secret room to find me when in doubt. I will practice magic in the secret room at any time." Not only did Li Feng say that, he also did so when the Hogwarts students packed their bags and greeted the summer vacation happily, Li Feng, who was immersed in the magic ocean, realized that he had been in the dark room for more than a year. To say that during the year in the secret room, Li Feng has gained a lot of benefits, so let alone the improvement of his strength, Li Feng consciously can slap himself who has just come to this world anyway. And this white skin, Britain is a rainy country, and Li Feng is also a guy who likes to hide in secret rooms to practice magic. The days in the sun are one of the few, if it weren't for creatures cooking with various magic herbs. Helping Li Feng nourish, Li Feng has the same pale complexion as a vampire. In addition to these, the biggest gain is the file-size magic book of the matchbox in the pocket. Now the spells in the magic book are not 3 or 2 kittens, but after Creature copied Hogwarts books day and night, Li Feng himself I don't know how much magic is in this seemingly small magic book. Now Li Feng dares to slap his chest and admits, "I have most of the Hogwarts library." As for the original plot, except for the Dementors floating around Hogwarts, the rest was already lost by Li Feng. Didn't Harry now change his tea time to Hagrid to chat with Sirius in the secret room? Where did he come from? What plot? As the students left, Sirius was also packing up. In fact, during the half a year that Sirius had been monitoring and teaching Li Feng for half a year, he was quite sure that Li Feng was only practicing magic. Packing up now is just leaving the secret room on the occasion of Hogwarts summer vacation. After all, in order to monitor Li Feng, Sirius spends less time in the sun than Li Feng. He feels that he is staying in the secret room if Li Feng does something wrong. I know, but he will definitely be crazy. Not long after Sirius left, Li Feng looked at Merlin Mohuin reluctantly, and it was time for him to leave. Because Li Feng has already perceived that the quantum energy in his body is weakening, this thing is linked to the crossing door, and the ghost knows how the quantum energy is supplemented. If he didn't return to the Marvel world before the quantum energy dissipated, he would really have to stay in Harry's world. Even after returning to the Marvel world, he would still be able to use the gate. After all, the way he got the gate was inexplicable. For infinite gems, Li Feng had no choice but to give up on Hogwarts. After a long time, Li Feng took a deep breath and slowly spit out, and said to Creature, "Creature, leave the 2 suitcases with the largest space. After packing the remaining luggage, I will go to Azkaban and wait for me. I will come to pick you up and leave after I'm busy." Creature nodded blankly, cast a spell to put away the tent and other luggage, and lowered his head and said, "Yes, boss." After a while, Creature teleported all the way to Azkaban with large and small bags of luggage. As for Li Feng, with a gloomy face, he kept pondering the loopholes in his plan, and he was going to make a big deal before leaving this world. As for how big the ticket is, some people describe the achievements of a man like this: 30 years old is rich, 40 to 50 years old and girlfriends, 70 to 80 years old can drive by himself, 100 years old can still stand and pee, 300 years old at that time. The photos were still hanging on the wall, and what Li Feng could achieve was that his photos would still be hanging on the wall of the Ministry of Magic 500 years later. For several days, Li Feng kept changing into other people's appearances, appearing to be wandering around in every corner of Britain, quietly taking a few moments of nearby terrain. Until this evening, not far from Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge's house, Li Feng transformed into a street-begging homeless man sitting on the side of the road, scanning the pedestrians on the street with his eyes, looking for Fudge who came back from work. There are many reasons why Li Feng set his first target at Fudge. First, after a simple investigation, Li Feng knew that Fudge likes money, so Li Feng felt that there should be a lot of collections in this guy's home, and these collections are all in Li Feng, whether they are knowledge or magic items. On the robbery list, the second is status. They are also ministers of magic anyway. If the house is ransacked and you don't know how much disturbance it will make, it should be easy to get Dumbledore's attention. As long as Dumbledore was drawn away from Hogwarts and Hogwarts became undefended, Li Feng's plan was mostly successful. Only when Li Feng came to Fuji's house did he realize that he wanted something bad, and he didn't know how Necromancer's brain grew. He liked to hide his home, which made Li Feng want to break into the other party while Fuji was not off work. The plan of home looting was bankrupt before it was implemented. How can you looting without even knowing where the other's home is? Nothing. Li Feng could only squat by the side of the road and wait for Fudge to return to reveal the hidden house before the robbery began. About half an hour later, Li Feng finally found Fudge in the crowd who was humming a little song and taking his wife back home. Li Feng pretended not to see Fudge following behind the opponent, waiting for Fudge to reveal his home. Li Feng shot Fudge's wife with a magical impact with his left hand, knocked the opponent into the air, and shot at Fudge with a seduction spell with his right hand. To play a role, Li Feng drew out his wand and gave the opponent a petrification technique. As for how nearby muggles would react to such a fantasy scene, Li Feng didn't care. He had long seen these fake pure-blood necromancers uncomfortable, especially the pure-blood theory that was so sick that it was hopeless to be cured. Li Feng knows that although Fudge is not a Death Eater, he is still a supporter of pedigree, so now, he doesn't mind letting Fudge see how his magician, who was born in 8 generations of poor peasants, beat them. Necromancer, put the so-called pure-blood theory underfoot. I don't know if Fudge was originally lacking in combat power, or he was greedy for power and corrupted his original strength. Anyway, Li Feng's follow-up methods were not used. Fudge was subdued by Li Feng. The corner of Li Feng's mouth twitched, and he said with disdain, "It's so weak." After that, Li Feng dragged Fudge and rushed into his home. As he entered Fudge's house, Li Feng waved his hand to open the portal and recruited the Dementor who had been waiting for orders to Fudge's house. Just as the Dementors searched every corner of the room, Li Feng unlocked the petrified Fudge, which was another seduction spell, and asked, "Dear Minister, take me to admire your collection." Fudge was also a necromancer anyway. Li Feng was afraid that the opponent would be more resistant to temptation spells. When Fudge took Li Feng to the collection room, Li Feng did not forget to add temptation skills at any time. When Fudge woke up and saw that the secret room filled with collections was empty, the tears flowed down as a miserable one, which was comparable to the rainfall in the UK in a year. After looting Fudge's house, Li Feng didn't go far. Instead, he hid in the distance and watched the horror keep coming and going in and out of Fudge's house. Li Feng, who has never seen Dumbledore, frowned. It seems that Dumbledore is not here. Isn't old Deng coming to comfort Fudge at this time? Or is Dumbledore already asleep? This is totally unreasonable. It's not dark enough to sleep. Half an hour later, Li Feng, who was certain that Dumbledore would not come, dared to ransack the subject, Draco Malfoy's home. In addition to the fact that Li Feng had entered his house when the Dementors searched Sirius before, he was not afraid that Malfoy would hide the house. Another reason is that this house is a strong supporter of the pure blood theory that Li Feng is uncomfortable with. Their Li Feng conscience will be overwhelmed. After looting several families that support the pure blood theory, Li Feng, who has never seen Dumbledore, had to return to Azkaban ahead of time to hand over the 2 bulging suitcases to Creature and replace the 2 with no traces. The retractable suitcase appeared in the knockover alley. Compared to Diagon Alley, there are more black magic items here. As for the danger, let's take a look at the Dementors that cover the sky and the moon. Faced with this group of disgusting things that can't be killed, Li Feng doesn't believe that except for Deng Bu. Outside of Leto and a few others, who would dare to face his army of Dementors. As for the Necromancer's rebellion, It's not that Li Feng underestimated them, but this group of necromancers don't know how many years of peace, teamwork that knows the ball, plus the opponents are all mixing in the knockoff alley. Obviously they are not good people. They are basically selfish guys, so it's good not to pull each other's hind legs. I am saying that Li Feng is not eating dry food. He now uses the calendar fire curse as well as how familiar he is. In case someone really fights in a group, Li Feng doesn't mind a few calendar fire curses, and those who have super ability to protect Li Feng don't be afraid. Mirror space means that people are shut down when people are shut down, and no discussion is allowed. However, Li Feng was also quite puzzled. He never concealed the Dementor during the looting. Others didn't know that Li Feng could control the Dementor. Would Dumbledore still not know? Why is he almost looting most of the wizarding world, yet he hasn't seen Dumbledore? Could it be that Dumbledore knew that his ultimate goal was Hogwarts? Standing on the roof, Li Feng licked his lips. Since Lao Deng won't stop me, then I'm not welcome. Wonkai, let all the Dementors rush into the store and drive away all the people inside. If anyone resists, they will directly attack in a group. If you still dare to resist, I will allow you to use the Dementor Kiss. Just as Li Feng was about to sack Knockout Alley, hesitation to look at Diagon Alley, Dumbledore, who was staying in the Hogwarts library, was almost unable to sit still, and the letters asking for help went to him like snowflakes. Smashing his head, the owl delivering the letter almost filled the library. Dumbledore knew that Li Feng did it since he knew that the accomplice of the ransack had Dementors, and he guessed Li Feng's goal from the beginning. Who made Li Feng's favorite thing to do when he was at Hogwarts was to copy books and discuss I want all kinds of books. Before the library was properly arranged, Dumbledore dared not leave Hogwarts easily, until Snape, McGonagall and other 4 sub-academic deans rushed to the library after receiving Dumbledore's request for help. Dumbledore did this. The 4 professors were hurriedly ordered to guard the library and open the portal to Knockdown Alley. In Knockdown Alley, Li Feng, who was busy in the drugstore while paying attention to the surroundings, suddenly saw a portal on the street, and grinned silently, but Li Feng was not busy leaving for the time being, and he still had to make sure that the person in front of him was Dang. Bledo, what if a Exabe Goods arrives, and then Li Feng plunges into the Hogwarts trap? After a while, when the Dementors heard that they were sure they were smelling Dumbledore, Dumbledore had already shot the Dementors in the sky. As Li Feng opened the portal, he watched Dumbledore release the Roar Guardian, and let a silver-white phoenix drive the Dementors around, but only let the Dementors run around. I want to rely on the Guardian of the God Roars. Killing them is still a bit difficult. Li Feng is not sure whether Dumbledore can kill the Dementor. In order to reduce unnecessary losses, Li Feng ordered Wonkai to lead the Dementor and Dumbledore through a slave contract to entangle Dumbledore in a non-stop fighting manner. If Dumbledore was found to be leaving, allowing the Dementors to attack the residents staying in Knockout Alley. Across the portal, when Li Feng turned to close the portal, Dumbledore, who rolled his eyes wide and called his name loudly, prayed in his heart, I hope Dumbledore's temper is the same as in the movie, and I don't want to see the innocent people sacrifice, even if this person is the Black Necromancer in Knockdown Alley. If Dumbledore appeared in front of him since the looting of Li Feng would open the portal directly to the library and looted books that had no magical powers. As for those books without magical powers, Li Feng said that he would pass through. If the door can't be taken away, it's useless if he snatches it. But now, all fools knew that Dumbledore had guessed his plan, and Li Feng would not rush into the library stupidly. Li Feng, who was hiding outside the school, opened the portal to the marble file size, and quietly observed the library. After seeing 4 professors guarding him, he opened the portal directly to Pomona Sprout's herbal greenhouse. This is also the result of Li Feng's deliberation. First of all, some magic materials are unique to Harry's world. Even if Li Feng has superb potion technology, it is not the same without materials after returning to the Marvel world. Secondly, if Li Feng wants to successfully get the books he wants, some small methods are still necessary. For example, 4 professors are let out of the library. In Sprout's medicine garden, besides organ traps, there is also communication magic. As for the role, I won't say much, it is nothing more than to allow Sprout to notice the changes in the pharmacy for the first time. What Li Feng wanted was to use the magic of communication to lead Sprout out of the library. As for the organ traps in the pharmacy, as long as these things are to prevent birds and beasts from ruining the pharmacy, plus this is a school, it is not suitable for powerful traps. What if it hurts naughty students? Therefore, Li Feng has enough strength to ignore the trap. Li Feng deliberately touched the magic of communication, and when he broke into the medicinal garden and happily harvested various medicinal seeds or seedlings, Sprout kept strictly in the library and immediately perceived that someone was making trouble in her greenhouse. He covered his mouth and said nervously and helplessly, "Merlin's socks, is there an animal breaking into my pharmacy at this time?" Snape taught Li Feng's potions and knew that Li Feng was actually interested in medicinal materials. When Sprout mentioned the greenhouse inexplicably, Snape suddenly realized something and nervously said, "No, Li Feng's goal is medicinal materials." McGonagall was stunned, stretched out his hand to open the portal to the sky above the pharmacy in order to check the specific situation in the pharmacy. Li Feng, who perceives the fluctuation of the portal, raised his head and glanced at the portal, and immediately lowered his head to speed up the harvesting action in his hands, hoping to harvest as many herbal seeds as possible before the professor rushed to the greenhouse. When the portal in the sky closed and appeared in front of the greenhouse again, Li Feng opened the portal without even thinking about it, dropped a scroll and then entered the portal with medicinal materials. Snape and Sprout didn't wait to point their magic wands at Li Feng, and they could only helplessly watch Li Feng close the portal. Sprout saw that the various medicinal materials he carefully cultivated were blown up by Li Feng, his face pale in anger, and his entire face was twitching. Snape was not busy comforting Sprout, but hurriedly picked up the scroll on the ground. Snape, who just opened the scroll and looked at it, was also pale, and hurriedly threw the scroll to Sprout, ran to his storeroom and said, "The scroll is Austin's compensation for you, and you stayed there. This prevents Austin from returning to the drug garden." On the scroll, apart from compensating Sprout, Li Feng also informed Snape of his next goal. Unfortunately, Li Feng chose Snape's collection. For the first time, Snape, who was running wild with his legs, was secretive about why Hogwarts banned phantom migration and invented the portal guy. The same as the road from the medicine garden to the storage room. On the one hand, Li Feng opened the portal directly to his storage room. On the other hand, Snape ran forward. Who is faster and who is slow? When Snape ran into his storage room, he could only watch Li Feng closing the portal and losing most of the rare medicinal materials and potions. Looking at the scroll that Li Feng deliberately left on the ground as compensation, Snape picked it up and opened it with a green face. After reading the content on the scroll, he realized that Li Feng used the magic ring of Merlin and some magic to make compensation, then Snape's eyes twitched. The rare medicinal materials and medicines left on the shelves. He knew that Li Feng did not want to take all of them, but deliberately left the medicine, just like Sprout's medicine garden. As long as Sprout dared to leave the medicine garden, Li Feng would immediately return to the medicine garden and harvest all the medicines. By the same token, if Snape ignored these medicinal materials and potions and went straight back to the library, then Li Feng would open the portal again and put all these things in his bag. Definitely, Li Feng also knew that Snape could return to the library to protect the books as long as he hid the medicinal materials and potions, but it takes time to pack the potions, and it takes time to pack the rare medicinal materials. What if the medicinal materials are injured and the efficacy of the medicine is greatly reduced? And what Li Feng wanted was such a little time. As long as Dumbledore was led out of the campus, and the professors were led away separately, Li Feng, who wandered freely by the portal, did not believe that he could not get the magic books. The only trouble is McGonagall. After all, the other party will also open the portal. Definitely, Li Feng's portal proficiency far exceeds McGonagall, and he is not afraid that the other party can catch up with him. As long as McGonagall leaves the library, he has a way to let him. McGonagall can only run back to the library on both legs. According to the plan, after Li Feng opened the portal and dropped a scroll as compensation, he frantically searched the private collection of the dean and curse teacher of Ravenclaw College, and stayed at the book by Mr. Filius Flitwick. Flitwick in the room has perception that the various spells he has researched are being searched by Li Feng. Flitwick hesitation. When he wants to come to McGonagall, he will also teleport spells, plus the originally strong strength. How can he stop Li Feng for a moment? As long as he has this moment to buffer, McGonagall opens the portal to pick them up. Back to the library, Li Feng couldn't looting the library. McGonagall seemed to see Flitwick's thoughts, and immediately opened the portal to send Flitwick to his private collection room. Li Feng didn't wait for McGonagall's portal to open, and immediately opened to McGonagall's collection room. McGonagall, who perceives Li Feng in her collection room, is speechless and helpless. She has no choice but to open the portal and return to her collection room. Just in case, McGonagall did not close the portal, but took the books. The room and the collection room are connected together. Although Li Feng, who fled outside the school, didn't grab anything from Magna, he didn't take it to heart. Instead, he opened the file-size portal to the library and secretly observed everything in the library. Seeing that McGonagall was staying in the collection room, just maintaining the portal, Li Feng quietly opened the portal and got into the blind spot of the library, and immediately opened his portal to McGonagall's portal, making the two portals tight, close to each other. If McGonagall stepped through the portal at this time, she would find that she actually passed through two portals, and the place she was teleporting to was naturally not in the library but outside the campus. When McGonagall understood what was going on, and slowly reopened the portal, Li Feng followed suit and placed his portal next to McGonagall's portal again. Helpless McGonagall could only hide her private collection in a hurry. When she returned to the library, Li Feng had already snatched most of the magical books. Only Snape, who returned to the library with the potion, was the first to hide the potion, and his face was stern. "Hold the scroll in your hand and stand in the library." Returning to Azkaban, Li Feng grinned his back teeth and gently stroked the suitcases in front of him. The so-called murder and arson gold belt, don't underestimate the fact that there are only a few suitcases. These are leather suitcases with no traces. They store most of the spoils of Li Feng's crazy search for the magic world, and they are all magical items. If they are all displayed on the exhibition, it is estimated that a large truck can't fit. With the help of these materials, I believe that as long as Li Feng is willing to work hard to transform it into strength, he will be able to stand firm in the Marvel world. Even if there is no army of Dementors, he is not an unknown person who acts on the faces of others. In order to prevent Dumbledore from guessing where he was hiding, Li Feng used a slave contract to let the Dementors who had been holding Dumbledore scattered and flee, and then waited at the designated place for him to open the portal and take them back to Azkaban. All moved to the Marvel world. After a while, Wong Kai told Li Feng through the slave contract that they had gotten rid of Dumbledore. Immediately, Li Feng opened the portal to let the Dementor get into a seamlessly retractable suitcase, and walked to the opening of the crossing door with the suitcase. The place. Back in the Marvel world, Li Feng ordered Creature, who was curious about the new world, to drag the RV out of the cave, while he sat cross-legged on the sand, perceiving the changes in quantum energy in his body. If the quantum energy continues to dissipate, Li Feng said that he will never be able to open the crossing door anymore. Once he loses the way to quickly become stronger, it will make him very distressed. After a while, Li Feng was delighted to see that the quantum energy not only did not dissipate, but was slowly recovering. Although Li Feng was puzzled by the quantum energy that would dissipate and recover for a while, he at least knew that the through gate could be used in the future. It's also a happy event. Li Feng let out a long sigh of relief. When he was about to quit meditation, he seemed to hear someone cling help in his ear. Li Feng, who opened his eyes, looked around and asked suspiciously, "Creature, you heard someone, do you ask for help?" Creature shook his head blankly, and said, "Boss, did you misunderstand it? It's actually the wind." Li Feng rubbed his eyebrows and shrugged his shoulders and said, "It may be that he was so busy at Hogwarts before that he mistakenly used the sound of the wind as a call for help." Suspecting that he had heard him wrong, Li Feng put the cry for help behind his head, drew his magic wand and dragged the RV out of the cave. Sitting in the driving position, Li Feng, who couldn't start the RV after turning his cart key for half, was puzzled. He felt the back of his head for a long time before he realized that the car had eaten sand in the cave for a year and a half, and there was little left. Gasoline has long been evaporated clean, where's the power to start? Nothing. Li Feng could only order Creature to set up a tent in the cave as a temporary camp, and by the way change the RV magic. The magic conversion of a caravan is a big project, which cannot be completed in a short while, and Li Feng still lacks some necessary common materials. Although Li Feng brought back a lot of magic materials from Harry's world, not all of the materials in the flying RV are magic materials. It's better to improve family life if you have this money. Just buying these common materials made Li Feng a little embarrassed. Even though he has been in the Marvel world for so many years, there are only a few cities he knows well. The first is Chinatown in New York. Although he hasn't been there for many years, Li Feng said that he is still familiar with it. The problem is that New York is a metropolis and there are many cameras. It is estimated that Li Feng only needs to show up on the street. S.H.I.E.L.D. comes in minutes. Although Li Feng now has both the strength and the army of Dementors, he is not afraid of S.H.I.E.L.D. at all, but he can still disappear, especially Fury. Talking to that salted egg is too awkward and pits everywhere. Li Feng said that he can't afford to hurt his brain cells. The second is Kathmandu, where Taj Kama is located. If Li Feng's strength has not improved much before, he may choose to purchase materials in Kathmandu, but as his strength increases, as long as he is a magician with a bit of cultivation, he can discover his mana attributes, and Letta the Dark Magician goes to the White Magician's Den to buy materials. Li Feng hasn't been so courageous yet. When Li Feng is besieged by a group of magicians, will he resist or get caught? In the unlikely event that Li Feng's incident hits Ancient One, do you think Ancient One destroyed Li Feng or killed Li Feng in order to soothe people? The last city is Portland, where Li Feng has lived for a while, and is known as the City of Roses. The only trouble is that Li Feng is not sure whether S.H.I.E.L.D. is still paying attention to it. In the end, Li Feng chose to change the appearance of others and went to Portland to purchase materials. Just as Li Feng was about to open the door to Portland, Creature had already set up the tent and walked out of the cave to Li Feng. He looked up and asked, "Boss, Creature is going to cook for you, but I don't know the boss. What ingredients are there? Or where is the vegetable market? Creature is going to buy it now." Food market. Li Feng turned his head and glanced at the desolate desert around him. Does this place seem to have a vegetable market? Li Feng touched his pocket. When I went to Portland to buy materials, my pocket was almost cleaner than my face. Scratching his head, Li Feng turned and walked into the tent, preparing to send a letter to Ancient One asking her to discuss something, and by the way make a small business with the boss of Ancient One. Just picking up the pen and parchment, Li Feng patted his forehead. "Ma Dan, I have been in Harry's world for a long time, and I have a phone in the world. I write a letter from Mao, saying that Ancient One has a mobile phone. NS. Also, what's the phone number of Taj Kama?" After thinking for a long time, Li Feng finally wrote a letter, who made him forget Taj's phone number. After finishing writing the letter, Li Feng had just opened a miniature portal and was about to drop the letter directly into Ancient One's lounge. On the other side of the portal, the voice of Ancient One rang. "Li Feng." "Master Ancient One. Well, you are at home." Although sending mail through the portal saves time and postage, it was discovered by Ancient One before. "I quietly mailed, I left quietly," which made Li Feng somewhat embarrassed. Ancient One didn't care if Li Feng was embarrassed or not. I guess that Li Feng didn't dare to come to Kamataj to see him in person. It was probably because of her strength. She was afraid that her disciples and grandchildren would recognize him as a dark magician, and he would be taught a lesson. Ancient One opened the portal directly and walked into Li Feng's tent to see Creature, who was obviously a magic creature, but Ancient One knew that when Li Feng could carry magic creatures through, he expected such a day, so he just glanced at it. He stretched out his hand to signal Li Feng not to speak, but perceptively perceives the energy of the surrounding space with interest. Compared with the weird-looking magical creatures, Ancient One is obviously more interested in space spells. Li Feng was stunned, cast his eyes to Creature, and motioned to Creature to make tea and take Ancient One to visit his temporary residence. After a while, Ancient One walked out of the tent and curiously walked around the small tent, but there was a tent of more than 100 square meters inside, and said, "Very interesting props. I suddenly have a new understanding of the fighting methods in the mirrored space. For example, when I play against the enemy, I release an infinite space, and he can't run in front of me if I'm exhausted. Haha. Compared with the tactics of exhausting opponents, you should always find the idiot who dares to fight against you." Li Feng Shanshan smiled, and at the same time took off the time converter on his neck and handed it to Ancient One, and said, "Master, take a look at this first." While talking, Li Feng took out the magic book from his pocket again, turned to the page of the record time converter, and signaled Ancient One to look through it. Ancient One, who has a deep knowledge of time spells, gradually reduced his expression. While touching the time converter in his hand, he frowned and looked at the magic book. For a long time, Ancient One, who couldn't see a smile on his face, said solemnly, Li Feng, regarding the practice of time spells, I warned you before, don't play with time, it will cause time branches. Ancient One raised the time converter and continued, this little thing will bring you back to the past, but it also means that in a certain period of time in the past, too you have appeared in this world, and time will definitely branch out. We'll be trapped in the infinite loop of the time branch, and will never be able to turn over. Li Feng nodded, saying that he knew it, but Li Feng shrugged and smiled. What if this world has been without me for a certain period of time in the past? Ancient One froze for a moment, and then realized that Li Feng could travel to other worlds. Once Li Feng opened the door to travel, where did Li Feng come from in the Marvel world? Not to mention that big sister Ancient One can't find Li Feng. It is estimated that the sister time in the local world is also wondering. You explained that it is a small fish in its arms. How can it be gone? Then after a while, she popped out inexplicably. Sister Time said that she couldn't figure it out. With a little uncertainty, Ancient One guessed, do you want to rely on this little thing to return to the local world when you left the local world when you returned from Otherworld? Li Feng nodded. This is also what Li Feng has been looking for in order not to let himself miss certain plots. Just like this time, it took Li Feng 1.5 years to travel to Harry's world, but it took another 1.5 years for the Marvel world. If there is a way to return from Harry's world to Marvel's world, he will return directly to the day after he went to Harry's world. Sister Time thought Li Feng was just leaving the Marvel world for one day. Li Feng said with certainty that he would not miss the opportunity to collect infinite gems. After listening to Li Feng's explanation, Ancient One expressed his understanding, especially Li Feng, in order to prevent time from branching out, carefully set the time to return to the Marvel world on the second day after crossing, which made Ancient One a lot of relief. Knowing Li Feng's attitude towards time and what he wants, and knowing the consequences, Ancient One, who was originally interested in the time converter, didn't say much. He lowered his head and joked while recording the time converter's data, and said, but this is the case. Come, don't think you're less than 30 years old in the local world, but the time you travel to Otherworld still affects your body, and it will not decrease because you return to the past, which means that your ID card will show that you are only 30 years old, but his face is covered with age spots. The corner of Li Feng's mouth twitched. This joke is really not funny at all. Not to mention that Li Feng's lifespan is prolonged after possessing mana. It is said that Otherworld's treasures that can make people live longer are countless. If Li Feng's luck is better, it's possible to live forever, and you will always have a face in your 20s, age spots. What is that? Chapter 91. After talking about the time converter, Ancient One looked at Creature. Seeing this, Li Feng was busy explaining to Ancient One what a house elf is and its inner values. Li Feng was long-winded. Ancient One finally understood what Li Feng wanted to express. To sum it up, Creature would not leave Li Feng's side, otherwise Creature would be killed by the servility he had cultivated over the years. This made Ancient One curious about Creature's race, and severely warned Li Feng to be optimistic about Creature. As for the reason, if the capitalists of the Marvel world knew that there was still this kind of loyalty to kill Creature and kill him immediately. The little elves exist, they are not crazy yet to catch Creature, then they will draw blood, clones and copy or something, and put hundreds of creatures to work in their own factories, or to various high-level jobs. They still don't make a profit. When Ancient One was explaining, Li Feng had a stunned face. To be honest, he had never thought of this kind of operation. The only thing he thought of was that forces such as Shield Hydra would be interested in the magical creature. It's just a kind of experiment, and he really hasn't thought about the ideas of capitalists. After living for an unknown amount of time, Ancient One, who has become a human spirit, is used to seeing all kinds of ridiculous wars due to a little profit. He knows that humans like to be dead, and said quietly, Hydra knows that Creature's existence will certainly cause you trouble. But they use Creature more to enhance their own strength, and they believe in the warriors they have cultivated since childhood, rather than the so-called elf warriors. But the capitalists are different. What they want is money, and cloning a creature means that they pay less wages and increase their income. What do you think of those greedy capitalists? No, to say that those workers are forced to lose their jobs, it means that most of a city is housed elves. Once these house elves feel that ordinary people are not worthy of their masters, what do you think of a war between ordinary people and house elves who possess magic? Quote, "Don't think it's impossible. After all, in the concept of house elves, they are the servants of magician, not the servants of ordinary people." Li Feng shuddered. By Ancient One, Shan Shan said, "Where is the army? And the final nuclear peace?" Ancient One shook his head and felt ridiculous at Li Feng's still somewhat naive thoughts, and said, "What then? Except for the humans hiding in the refuge, at least half of the remaining dead and injured, I said at least, understand. Plus the environment, the destruction caused food shortages and human evil thoughts erupted during the disaster. How many humans can survive even if hiding in the refuge? And listening to your introduction, I feel that house elves survive radiation and food shortages. Hi. I'm afraid that house elves will become the masters of the earth in a few hundred years, and humans will be locked in the zoo with the label of treasure species, don't eat." I don't know why. After listening to Ancient One's words, Li Feng had the idea to kill Creature now. Fortunately, Ancient One said quietly at the end, "I think I'll use the eyes of Agamotto to see if I'm going to be in the future. What changes, if?" Ancient One did not finish speaking, but looked at Creature. Li Feng also glanced at Creature, nodded slightly. He understood what Ancient One was thinking. It was nothing but Ancient One. If he saw Creature betraying him in the future, then Li Feng could only let Creature disappear. If he did not betray, Li Feng would naturally continue to enjoy Creature's service. After thinking about it, Li Feng Shanshan opened the suitcase containing the Dementor, scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "I'm back this time with a group of servants besides Creature." At the moment when the suitcase was opened, Ancient One frowned and waved his hand to force the biting chill from the Dementor back into the suitcase. There was no need for Li Feng to say more. She already understood that the creatures in the suitcase were not kind creatures, but a group of half-life and half-dead evil species. When Li Feng introduced that the Dementors were basically unkillable creatures in the original world, Ancient One raised his hand to a Dementor with disdain and killed one on the spot. Inside the suitcase, when the Dementor's cold air was sealed by the Ancient One and there was no leak in the suitcase, Wang Kai looked at Ancient One and Li Feng with a bewildered face, and saw that the Ancient One killed a tribe member comfortably. Wang Kai suddenly looked at Li Feng pitifully, begging for mercy, hoping that Li Feng could stop the bald lady from killing his people. Wang Kai felt that the shadow area in his heart had been expanding since he met Li Feng, but he didn't have the courage to say that when he was in Harry's world before, Li Feng basically ignored him. He was still free to be the leader of the Dementor. Are you looking at what life he is now? Not to mention that Li Feng doesn't care about their hungry stomachs, or that hundreds of Dementors are crowded into the narrow suitcases that even struggle to turn around. How can they be killed by individuals now? At the beginning, it was said that Dementors could not be killed, and that they were invincible by nature. What if the rule said that if you turn your face, you turn your face? Ancient One glanced at Li Feng and smiled. Is it impossible to kill? Li Feng shrugged, not to mention that Ancient One can easily kill Dementors. Even the pupils in Kamatage wanted to kill a few Dementors. That was a lot. However, it is also because there are more people who can kill Dementors by Kamatage. Ancient One will only record the information of the Dementors, and after applying for the temporary residence permit, with Creature, they will not be involved. Anyway, the Dementors can't be in the Marvel world. How about it? Li Feng raised it as long as he wanted to raise it, only when Li Feng raised a big dog that was a bit lethal. In addition, Li Feng used a slave bond to restrain the Dementor, which is equivalent to tying an iron chain around the neck of a big dog. Compared to the soldier-type Dementors, Ancient One is more worried about Creature. After all, Dementors are useless to capitalists and are not even qualified to be bodyguards, unless that person likes to be absorbed by Dementors. Be happy and be a fool. But, Ancient One looked at Li Feng with a smile, and said quietly, how do you provide them with food? Li Feng, Ma Dan, forget that these guys can't eat white rice, but suck the happiness of people. Or let the Dementors sneak into the prison to suck the prisoners. Li Feng, who quietly watched Ancient One's face, was about to forget the bad idea he had just thought of. He didn't want to be hung in the desert by the human master Asgardian Ancient One. Scratching his head, Li Feng looked down at Wang Kai and asked in undead language, Wang Kai, how long can you live without eating or drinking? Hearing Li Feng's question, Wang Kai, who had guessed what Li Feng wanted to say, felt that his mentality was about to collapse, and said sadly, "Master, although we are not hungry, the hunger will drive us crazy. If I don't die, I'll be mad or not. Even if I'm mad, I'm still bound by a slave contract." Li Feng thought about the big deal to let the Dementors follow him to Otherworld to eat, and turned his head to Ancient One and said, "It's okay, the Dementors are not hungry. Let them be hungry, and wait for me to figure out a way to feed them." After speaking, Li Feng closed the suitcase and let Wonkai stay cool. When he walked to the other suitcase, Li Feng rubbed his hands flatteringly, and opened the suitcase and said, "Master, do you want these materials? I want to sell them to you." Ancient One looked down at the seamless retractable leather suitcase, and saw that various props and materials were placed messily in the suitcase, some of which were still inexplicable items, such as a teapot with an open mouth, chasing a flower. The magical flowers floating around are in a posture that they will not give up without taking a bite. How to drop it? Are you going to eat this flower from the spout and make yourself a pot of scented tea? Very interesting gadgets. Ancient One took out a small object from the suitcase, looked at Li Feng and said, "Are you short of money?" Li Feng scratched his head, looked at the RV that was dismantled by creature in the distance, and said, "Shanshan, knack, very lack." Ancient One followed Li Feng's gaze to the RV, nodded and said, "You want to remodel the RV but lack funds." Yes. Li Feng didn't conceal anything about this. After all, he didn't say that Ancient One would know about it in the future, and what he asked for help from Ancient One was not just about selling materials. Concealing this and concealing that would be easy to lose. Trust of Ancient One. To be a human being, we must have integrity. Only when we have a foundation of integrity, it is easy to talk about some things. Just like now, after Ancient One agreed to spend money to purchase materials, Li Feng handed the wand to Ancient One and asked, "Master, can you imitate this stuff?" Although Li Feng didn't elaborate, Ancient One still heard that Li Feng wanted to learn how to make magic wands. In fact, Li Feng has no choice. He is destined to return to the Marvel world. What if the wand breaks or breaks while in the Marvel world? This thing is not sold in the Marvel world, plus he can't go back to Harry's world to buy it. At least now he doesn't have the ability. The only way he can think of is to learn how to make a wand or buy a bunch of spares. But when Li Feng asked Ollivander to teach him how to eat, Ollivander said that unless he is the inheritor of the mantle, he will not pass on the craft to outsiders. If Li Feng has to learn the craft of making magic wands, it is not impossible. As long as you sign the unbreakable contract, inherit his shop, and never break the rules of choosing the owner of the wand. Li Feng patted his butt and left, saying that he would not learn. The contract was signed only when he was ill. Li Feng didn't want to stay in Harry's world, nor did he want to be a wand crafter for a lifetime. He just wanted to improve his strength. As for buying a bunch of magic wands from Ollivander, Ollivander will sell it to Li Feng, but who is Ollivander? If someone buys his wand and uses a ruler to measure it for a long time, does he know that Li Feng has a wand and will sell it to him? So when he left Harry's world, Li Feng looted a lot of wands as spares, but after trying other wands, Li Feng realized that these looted wands were not easy to handle, or that the use of these strange wands would give him his strength. A big decline. With some curiosity, Ancient One used the magic wand to release several spells, indicating that the magic wand is good and can effectively improve the success rate of spell casting. As for imitation, it is not impossible, but this magic wand needs to be disassembled. As soon as Li Feng heard this, he immediately pulled out a few looted wands from a suitcase and handed them to Ancient One, letting Ancient One dismantle as much as they like. Ancient One studies slowly. After Ancient One picked out the items that he was interested in from the materials looted by Li Feng, he took a non-marking stretchable suitcase and left. Definitely, the suitcase was originally one of the items purchased by Ancient One. Who made Ancient One feel there are a lot of otherworld magic items that I am interested in, and I am also originally interested in the infinite retractable curse. Before long, a portal appeared in Li Feng's tent again. Ancient One stood inside the portal and handed a paper bag full of banknotes to Li Feng, saying, "Have you all lived in the desert area recently?" After receiving the purse, Li Feng nodded, touched the back of his head, and said a little embarrassingly, "Master, do you have a way to hide the mana attributes?" In fact, Li Feng not only knows that Ancient One has it, but it is also a top-level hiding method. She didn't see her old man using dark energy himself. Apart from accidental discovery by Caecilius, who else knows? Even if the Mortis later learned that Ancient One was using dark energy, it was not their own observation. Ancient One didn't know what Li Feng was thinking. He nodded and said, "Bring the magic book." Hearing this, Li Feng hurriedly took out the file-size magic book of the matchbox and handed it to Ancient One. Ancient One did not accept the magic book. He just reached out and clicked on the magic book and burned the method of hiding the mana attributes on the magic book. Said, "Treat creature well, in the future." Ancient One paused, as if he wanted to tell Li Feng about the future he saw. Even if Li Feng had some knowledge of time spells, perhaps Li Feng would be able to feel comfortable in the future. See the future. After hesitation, thinking that some things can easily cause unknown changes if they are notified in advance, Ancient One finally decided to conceal certain things and said vaguely, "He is very good." After speaking, Ancient One waved his hand to close the portal. Li Feng didn't think about the future, but just smiled inexplicably, because he knew that creature would at least not betray him in the future and would not cause any trouble in the future through Ancient One's narration. It's just Ancient One's attitude towards creature that Li Feng couldn't help but speculate. It seems that Ancient One knows my arrangements for creature. After thinking about it, Li Feng left his guessing behind. The future is talking about in the future, now, worry about it. Li Feng, who received the money, pinched to estimate the time difference between Afghanistan and Portland. When the Portland store was open for business, Li Feng held Mordor's face and opened the portal with a purse and came to a certain Portland home. The supermarket is preparing to buy the materials for the magic-modified car. Carrying a large capacity shoulder bag, Li Feng, who traveled back and forth between Afghanistan and Portland, ran a number of supermarkets, and secretly broke into the 4S shop and dismantled a number of brand new cars and got some parts, finally changed the spare parts for the RV are all ready. Returning to the endless desert, Li Feng officially began his half-year journey of transforming the RV. During the magic reform period, it can be said that there are constant troubles. Li Feng is struggling to think of some magic reform solutions. For example, how to make the RV safe flight is not a question of whether the RV can fly, but how to avoid the radar after the RV flies to a high altitude problem. Li Feng is just an elementary school scum. He doesn't understand this kind of technology. If you want to talk about how to use magic to avoid satellites and people's sight, Li Feng said that a stealth is solved, but the radar thing does not make sense. You can't see the RV with the naked eye. It means that the RV does not exist, and the RV can be found by the radar of radio positioning. Li Feng knew that after coating the exterior of the RV with a material that could absorb the band, the radar would not be able to detect it. However, Li Feng didn't know the specific name of this material, where it was sold, and how much it cost per barrel. Nothing. In the end, Li Feng could only portray the Muggle deportation curse on the RV. He comforted himself when Lei Fa discovered it. What if the military sent a plane to look for the RV, the flightman would only subconsciously avoid it. The RV will only report a not seen to the headquarters. At the same time, in order to prevent the military from bombing the RV with missiles, Li Feng used all kinds of protective methods in his mind, and he painted them on the RV, turning the RV into a mobile fortress. It is no exaggeration to say that while driving a RV with 7 to 8 defensive magics on its tires, Li Feng dared not go except at the scene of the nuclear explosion. He dared to drive the RV in the center of the roaring battlefield while drinking tea and cakes. Watch the battle between the two armies through the car window. After talking about the defense of the RV, I'm talking about Li Feng's proud work, which depicts a seamlessly retractable carriage and a 4-door storage cabinet with a large internal space. The space of the carriage is modified to imitate a small private jet, less than 5 meters wide and about 15 meters long. With Li Feng's current materials and knowledge, it is not impossible to expand the cabin space to the extent that the aircraft carrier is parked, but it is not necessary and it is too much trouble. For example, what if Li Feng is whistling and driving the car one day, suddenly his stomach becomes irritated and wants to be a big one? Run toward the toilet at home for half an hour, or open the portal to the toilet. Or use the phantom to move to the tub. This is an exaggeration. And Li Feng didn't want to settle down in the Marvel world. He still wanted to go home to hold his wife and children, so the question of finding a girlfriend in the future or whether it hurts money or not to fall in love has never appeared in his mind. So he and Creature are the only two living in the RV. Why do you need such a large space? Now this little space is enough. As for the Dementors, just squeeze them into the crowded suitcases. Li Feng didn't even want to let them out to do harm to the Marvel world, they would be destroyed by the Ancient One group. As for the 4-door locker, one of the doors was handed over to Creature's medicinal garden, which is more than 2 football fields in size. It can be said that most of the extraordinary medicinal materials in Harry's world can be found in this medicine garden. They can all be found. Once the medicinal materials are mature, Li Feng has enough medicinal materials to brush potions proficiency. At the beginning, the next door to the medicine garden was just an ordinary vegetable garden and a utility room. In addition to some sundries, only some tomatoes and green vegetables that Li Feng loves were planted. There were also a few hens who could only lay eggs, but I didn't know Creature. The brain convulsions are how to drip, which means that drinking fresh milk every day is good for health, and it forced Li Feng to get a few cows. With the start of cows, Creature was completely convulsed, saying that Li Feng's future sources of ingredients cannot be sprayed with pesticides and must meet high standards. Then he didn't know where to get some cattle and sheep to raise himself. This is not over. Creature accidentally heard Li Feng, who bought the duck neck from Chinatown, while chewing and saying that the thing was delicious, but the quantity was too small and it was too expensive. A few ostriches were stolen from the zoo, indicating that the eggs laid by this kind of chicken are not only full, but also have a long neck. Making a duck neck will definitely make Li Feng enjoy eating. At that time, Li Feng had a dumb face. Ostriches are birds, and chickens are also birds, but they are not the same species. And what he eats is duck neck, not chicken neck. If it weren't for being afraid of Creature's convulsion and causing harm to an animal, Li Feng really wanted to tell him that there is an animal in this world called a giraffe. That thing's neck is only called a long one, and the one made into a duck neck is enough to eat for a few days. NS. In this way, in the fog of Li Feng, Creature forcibly transformed the good vegetable garden into a breeding farm inexplicably, and the good RV was transformed into a self-sufficient small base by Creature. In addition to these two spaces, there is also a place for Li Feng to practice magic in the 4-door locker, and a collection room for Li Feng. However, in addition to all kinds of books on magic, the collection room now has only a few fragmentary objects, including the teapot that likes to chase magic flowers and bite. That evening, Li Feng sat on the roof of the car, drinking beer leisurely while watching Creature sprinkle various spices on the roast leg of lamb by the campfire. When Creature was carrying a sweet and juicy lamb to Li Feng, a portal suddenly appeared by the campfire. Seeing that the person coming was Ancient One, Li Feng hurriedly jumped out of the RV and handed the mutton in his hand to Ancient One, and said, "Master, why are you here? I won't say anything in advance, so I can prepare some richer food, Creatures. Cooking food is delicious not to be missed." Ancient One smiled and took a sip of the lamb, then nodded to Creature who was turning over the roast leg of lamb and said, "It is indeed a delicacy not to be missed." Hearing the compliment, Creature bowed slightly to Ancient One, expressing his thanks to Ancient One for the praise, and then turned around and evenly sprinkled the seasoning on the leg of the lamb, preparing to come up with a better craft to entertain Ancient One. Li Feng, who roughly guessed why Ancient One came from, signaled Ancient One to walk into the RV and take a good look at his home. After a while, the two walked into the collection room, ignoring Li Feng's collection of Ancient One, took out the time converter from his arms and gave it back to Li Feng. The eyes of Agamotto can see everything that happened in the past. Li Feng suddenly felt in his heart and thought to himself, "Ancient One doesn't know my old bottom, right? What do you always see?" Ancient One smiled and shook his head, ignoring Li Feng's question, but said, "Take out your magic book, I will give you the sorted spell." Li Feng was a little confused and didn't understand whether Ancient One knew his origins, but since Ancient One would also teach himself time-regulating spells, what was Li Feng being polite, and he was about to hand the magic book to the magic book. Ancient One reached out and clicked on the magic book with his fingers, then lifted the plate in his hand and said, "Don't mind if I take it away and taste it slowly." Don't say that Li Feng has not opened the magic book to check the new time spells. Even if he is immersed in the magic world, he will not care about a dinner plate. He nodded and said, "Definitely, there is a whole leg of lamb outside, which needs to be packed. Take it away." Ancient One, who reached out to open the portal, shook his head slightly, and turned back to Kamatage. Seeing the departure of Ancient One, Li Feng let out a long sigh, and put aside the guesswork about whether Ancient One knew he was old, and solemnly put the time converter on a separate collection shelf. This was Li Feng's first precious collection, and it is related to the time domain and needs to be properly kept. After laying down layers of magic and wrapping the time converter, Li Feng couldn't wait to open the magic book, ready to check the time spell. Only when Li Feng opened the magic book did he find out that, in addition to the spells related to time, Ancient One gave Li Feng the craftsmanship for making magic wands, but Li Feng frowned and scratched his head after reading it. This is different from what I thought. Shield somewhere secret base. In a pure white room less than 30 square meters, Phil Coulson, who is not handcuffed, wears a blindfold and sits upright in front of a metal table with 2 glasses of water and a mobile phone. Opposite Phil Coulson, Fury, who was finally bald and evolved into a marinated egg, read a detailed information about Phil Coulson, while leaning against the back of the chair with Erlang's legs, nibbling a taco. From eating in terms of speed, Fury has been hungry for a while. Soon, Fury, who had swallowed the last bite of the taco, put down the information, picked up the water in front of him, took a sip and said, "Phil Coulson, take off the blindfold." "Okay, sir." Phil Coulson took off his blindfold, wondering where it was. He only knew that after completing a mission, he suddenly received a call from Fury, and then he was led by 2 fully armed Secret Service teams wearing blindfolds, flying around in planes and cars to bring the base. Fury picked up the phone on the desk, opened a file and stared at Phil Coulson with only one eye, and said with a serious face, "Listen to a recording first and tell me your first feeling." After finishing speaking, Fury pressed the play, and a slightly familiar voice of Phil Coulson rang in the phone. This is a recording of Li Feng handing over the resurrection technology to Fury on the RV. Soon, the audio ended, and Phil Coulson asked half doubtfully, "Sir, this is Austin." Fury nodded. Phil Coulson was a little surprised, and said with a confused look, "What about the content of this recording?" Fury did not answer Phil Coulson's question. Instead, he said, "Regardless of whether the content is true or false, after listening to Austin, you have repeatedly emphasized not to let us resurrect the corpse and handed us a damaged USB flash drive with resurrection technology. What do you think?" Phil Coulson recalled a little, and said, "To be honest, my first reaction was not to believe it. After all, I was resurrected, how to say it, a little beyond my imagination." Fury nodded slightly and said, "What if you see a paper document and a medical expert tells you that these resurrection methods are real?" Phil Coulson said without thinking, "Find a way to repair the broken USB flash drive, and then experiment." "Same as I thought." Fury stood up and opened the door to the room, beckoning Phil Coulson to leave the room with him, and said, "When I knew that Austin had hypnotic ability, my first reaction was when I returned to the base with the USB flash drive. I was looking for a psychological assessor to check if I was affected by Austin hypnotic ability, and to determine whether I wanted to do a resurrection experiment after repairing the U-disc because of my own inner thoughts or because of the influence of hypnotic ability." Phil Coulson, who followed Fury, looked at the corridors full of soldiers and doctors wearing bioprotective suits, and asked curiously, "What did the assessor say? And sir, can I know where this is?" When he walked to the elevator, Fury pressed the elevator and said, "The inspection result shows that I am not hypnotic ability, but..." Fury shook the phone in his hand and said, "The experts told me that everyone is curious. In mind and rebellious mind, the more Austin refused to let me study, the more it aroused my urge to do experiments. Especially when a medical expert told me that the resurrection method was completely feasible, I couldn't be sure that this was not Austin. Ding is suggesting something to me. As for where it is," Fury said with a shrug, "I might tell you when you leave." As soon as the voice fell, the elevator door opened and Fury walked straight into the elevator, leading Phil Coulson all the way to the ground. The elevator was fast and slow. After a minute or so, the elevator finally opened slowly. This makes Phil Coulson unable to judge how deep he is underground. Out of the elevator, Phil Coulson was taken by Fury to an operating room. At Fury's signal, Phil Coulson observed the operating room like a slaughterhouse through the glass. "I saw 2 operating tables in the operating room, one of which was lying on the corpse of an orangutan with its chest cut open, and the other was an orangutan with an ups and downs chest, which was suspected of being anesthetized." At Fury's signal, several doctors in the operating room began to take out the internal organs of the dismembered orangutan and replace them with the internal organs soaked in formalin. Towards the end of the operation, Phil Coulson watched in disbelief that the doctors sutured a pair of apparently human arms to the broken arms of the two orangutans. Although Phil Coulson guessed that everything in the operating room was related to the resurrected corpse, he did not. Can't figure out how the self-administrator's brain was opened. Orangutans have human arms. Phil Coulson said he didn't understand what this operation was. For a long time, Phil Coulson watched the orangutans with human arms being carried into the resurrection instrument, until the anesthetized orangutan lay motionless in the instrument, and the orangutan that was mutilated and resurrected was blank, and used the pair of apes. When the human hand was flexibly scratching his armpit, Phil Coulson seemed to understand something, and asked in a semi-sure and semi-guessing tone, "Sir, is this an experiment of broken limb reborn?" Fury pointed to the motionless orangutan, shook his head and said, "This experiment is not a severed limb grafting. Have you seen the orangutan that was only anesthetized before but died? Only the dead corpse can be grafted and resurrected, and once the animals that were alive enter the final resurrection process, none of them can only survive. Judging from the current technology, if you want to repair your body if you have missing arms or legs, I can only shoot you first, cut your hands and feet on the stitches, and finally revive you." Phil Coulson hurriedly shook his head, saying that he is still alive. Even if he has a broken hand and foot, he does not want to be shot. As for the resurrection, Phil Coulson, who watched the orangutan mutilation with his own eyes, thinks it is better to forget it, which gives him a kind of posthumous punishment. The illusion of being sold on meat vendors is still the kind that doctors can choose. Looking at the weird orangutan that was alive and kicking after the resurrection, but also able to use human arms flexibly, Phil Coulson looked at Fury again and asked, "Sir, are there any side effects from the resurrection?" Fury nodded and motioned to Phil Coulson to continue to follow him, and said, "We have conducted animal experiments many times. Whether it is a chimpanzee or a mouse, the success rate of resurrection is very high. Remember what Austin said in the previous audio. Will the resurrected corpse lose memory? We have not found other side effects in animal experiments. As for whether the animal has lost memory, it is difficult for us to judge." After that, Fury stretched out his hand to open the door of the monitoring room while looking at Phil Coulson, faintly said, "The human resurrection experiment was only done once a few days ago, and the experiment was successful once. After the resurrection of the corpse, in addition to losing all memories, we did not find other side effects." Phil Coulson was stunned, and when he was about to ask about it, he saw Fury pointing to a man on the monitor screen with a naked upper body and full of scars, busy playing barbell squats, and asked, "Are you familiar?" Phil Coulson nodded in astonishment, and said, "Bob Mantner, a former member of the Special Service Team, was blown up by a grenade last month when he was on a mission." Fury looked at Phil Coulson with an unbelievable expression and smiled. "Since I got the USB flash drive from Austin, I asked the technical department to repair the USB flash drive while deleting the team to conduct the experiment. It took nearly 2 years. After many resurrection animal experiments and continuous improvement of resurrection technology, I dared to conduct human experiments some time ago." Phil Coulson, who has been watching the surveillance, watched Bob lift the barbell easily, frowned and said, "Sir," the barbell in his hand. "Almost 500 kilograms, Fury said, shaking his head. "It's not yet a Guinness record." Phil Coulson cast his eyes silently. "Fury, it's not a Guinness record, but I'm not blind," and Bob didn't breathe for a while. "This is totally playing." Fury was a little at a loss when seeing Phil Coulson. Taking into account his own arrangements, it would be better to explain some things. He said, "The muscles of living people are controlled by the brain, and the power they can exert is limited, but after the resurrection, Bob's muscles, but it is not within the control of the brain, he can exert 100% of his muscle power, so you see Bob like Superman." From the time he took the plane blindfolded, Phil Coulson had been confused until he saw Bob, who became Superman after being resurrected, and felt that Phil Coulson, whose 3 views had been revised, had faintly guessed something, and couldn't help asking, "Sir, you find me?" "Fury, I will arrange for Bob to be your subordinate, and you will become his inspector, and report everything you see to me at any time. Remember, this mission is not in the record file." As expected, Phil Coulson nodded and said, "Yes, sir, do you want me to see Bob now?" Fury shook his head and stared at Bob under surveillance. He didn't know what he was thinking about. After a while, he said, "You have also contacted Li Feng's information. Did you see that he has the ability and the place to resurrect the corpse?" Phil Coulson was taken aback, shook his head and said, "Current information shows that Austin is the only valuable caravan, but I can't see that the caravan can be equipped with equipment for resurrecting corpses, and his education is not enough. Support him to carry out the resurrection experiment, but he can completely sell the resurrection technology to big companies." "Yes, sell it to the capitalists. Then the problem is," Fury asked, squinting, "did you hear of any laboratory that completed the resurrection experiment?" Phil Coulson shook his head. He hadn't heard of it, even if it was a suspected rumor. Fury sighed and said, "This is also something I can't figure out. If Li Feng handed over the resurrection technology to us to resurrect the corpse, then why didn't he ask a capitalist, even private sponsorship, and why did he give it to us? Isn't it my personal charm?" Phil Coulson shrugged, saying he couldn't guess. For a long time, Fury said in a joking tone, "Before I don't know Austin's ultimate goal, I'm not going to continue to resurrect the corpse. Instead, I will study the grafting technique of severed limbs. Once the experiment is successful, we will no longer have disabilities. Soldiers, this can save a lot of pensions." At the same time, Fury added in his heart, "If we figure out the purpose of Austin, we will even remove the expenses for the purchase of the cemetery. With regard to the understanding of time, Ancient One is worthy of being a master among the masters. It just relies on the working principle of the time converter to organize it into spells and submit it to Li Feng. It can be said that as long as Li Feng practices step by step, one day he will be able to break away from the time converter. Circumstances go back in time. However, the time spell given to Li Feng by Ancient One is very different from the function of the Eye of Agamotto. The Eye of Agamotto allows you to see countless futures in the outside world as you lie in bed at home and watch a big movie. Even if this happens outside the Earth, you can enjoy the future while eating popcorn, just like in Women's Federation 3. Doctor Strange was clearly in Thanos' hometown, but he used the Eyes of Agamotto to see that the Iron Man on the future Earth snapped his fingers and wiped out Thanos. And Li Feng's spells can only see the past and the only future within his line of sight. For example, after some practice, Li Feng still couldn't release time spells from the apple that took a bite from his opponent alone. He could only release spells against the surrounding environment, so that he could look at him clearly like a ghost, and the time around him kept accelerating until Li Feng saw it. The apple was taken into the RV by the future creature and sliced into apple pie, which he ate. Among them, the part of creature making apple pie in the RV was made up by Li Feng's brain, because he only saw the future within his line of sight, and the scene of creature making apple pie took place in the RV, causing the compartment to isolate Li Feng. His sight made him unable to see whether creature was peeling the apple peel with his hands or the apple peel with a knife. Unless Li Feng ran into the RV, he would never see how apples were made into apple pie. As for seeing the past, it also made Li Feng speechless. Taking apples as an example, what Li Feng saw was not that the bitten apple was inexplicably restored to its original shape, but rather he took a bite when he watched the apple died. As for apples more past, I'm sorry, apple's past is beyond Li Feng's sight, and he can't see it at all. Unless Li Fengxian's painful pain has to see more of apple's past, he can only cast a spell while walking behind apple, watching apple return from his hand to the supermarket, return to the dealer, and finally stand in the orchard, watching the apple return to the apple tree. This made Li Feng a little bit painful. He could only see that the only future within his line of sight was useful. It was not that he didn't know the development of the plot. If it wasn't for time, Li Feng wouldn't bother to practice this tasteless time spell. The medicinal materials in the medicine garden were cut by Clay one after another, and he hid in 4 lockers. In addition to eating and sleeping, Li Feng, who practiced magic, said that he needed to go out and let the wind go, otherwise he could not decide when it would grow out. Mushrooms are poisoned by mushrooms. There is still no cure for good mushroom poisons, so lonely. Walking out of the training room, Li Feng looked at the magic wand and a long stick hesitation, and finally picked up the long stick in the corner and put it into his shoulder bag. Speaking of this long stick, Li Feng was really helpless. At first, Ancient One dismantled how many wands and finally understood the craftsmanship of the wand, but when Ancient One put the imitation wand into the list of magical weapons for its disciples and grandchildren, Kamataja's magician didn't even want to use a magic wand. At first, Ancient One was still wondering that the magic wand can increase the casting success rate and the power of the spell. In other words, it is also a good magic weapon. Why don't her disciples and grandchildren even look at it? It wasn't until Ancient One asked the apprentices and grandchildren's opinion that her apprentices didn't like baton-like magical weapons. They preferred to use a stick to kill the enemy. It's strange that they would use a baton that doesn't knock on dead man. Nothing. Ancient One could only go back to the house and continue to study and research, until the magic wand's role in improving the casting success rate was moved to the long and short sticks and strengthened, which made her apprentices and grandchildren praised and said it was very useful. And the magic wand craftsmanship that Ancient One handed to Li Feng at the beginning was naturally the magic circle burned on the long and short sticks after the modification, and the effect after strengthening was better than the magic wand, which made Li Feng had to give up the baton and replace it with a long stick. The stick is more powerful and easier to handle. However, there is a slight difference between this long stick made by Li Feng and Kamataja's magical weapon. The long stick is hollow, and Li Feng has also taken great pains to portray a non-marking stretch curse to make his Dementor's army moved into the long stick from the crowded suitcase to live in. This means that Li Feng with a long stick can summon his army at any time. Putting the long stick into his shoulder bag, Li Feng told Creature to take a good look at his home and reach out and open the portal to Portland, ready to relax while watching a movie. Walking out of a dead end, Li Feng, who was looking for a movie theater on the streets of Portland, felt that the atmosphere in the air was a little bit wrong, especially when Li Feng passed by the door of a musical theater. The weapon was aimed at the entrance of the theater. Li Feng, who didn't want to join in the fun, originally wanted to pat his butt and leave. It was just a gunfight. The gunfights in the movie are more touchy than reality, and there is nothing good to watch. It wasn't until Li Feng discovered that the weapons in the soldiers' hands did not look like firearms, but rather some kind of magnified flashlights, that Li Feng was stunned and wondered, ultraviolet light. Is this a scene of a soldier versus a vampire? Li Feng is a little curious. He has come to Marvel for a long time, but he has never seen a vampire in reality, so he has to wonder whether the vampire has been extinct by Taj Kama in the Marvel world where new species are flying in the sky. Stopping, Li Feng looked at the theater curiously, and wanted to see what the vampire's spiritual body looked like, but the vampire didn't see it. Only a woman in the theater was sitting on the stage, her hands seemed to be pulling. With a cello and a messy living corpse hiding nearby, suspected to be protecting a woman playing the cello. The magic eye can only see the spirit body, so Li Feng, who is a cello, really can't see it, but he has seen such a spirit body of a living corpse. This is a spirit body that only people who have been resurrected after death, and the power of the ability to resurrect corpses in the Marvel world, Li Feng not only knows clearly, but he also handed over the resurrection technology to them at the beginning, so the living corpses in the theater except for shield which force can the people of. Li Feng grinned silently and hurriedly left the theater door. Phil Coulson is also there. This lady who is suspected of playing the cello is not Phil Coulson's girlfriend. Living corpse, do you know how long I have been waiting for the resurrection of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Before he walked far, Li Feng walked into an uninhabited alley and changed his coat into a black cloak covering his whole body. Then he drew out a long stick with magic wand function to cast the phantom spell, grinned and cast phantom migration, and flew from the back door of the theater. Enter the theater. Flying into the theater, Li Feng glanced at Phil Coulson who was alerting the entrance of the theater, and silently smiled and wrapped the living corpse Bob into the mirrored space. The moment Bob entered the mirror space, he pulled out his pistol and pulled the trigger again and again at Li Feng, waiting for the bullet to hover in front of Li Feng inexplicably. After losing kinetic energy, he clanged and fell to the ground. Bob quickly drew his dagger again. With a slightly forced expression, he asked, "A supernatural person?" Seeing that Li Feng did not answer his question, Bob glanced at the surrounding crystal walls and looked at Li Feng who was spinning around him with a guarded look. Seeing Li Feng's interested eyes, Bob suddenly had a kind of himself hanging on the shelf. The illusion of Li Feng's inspection of the quality of the goods. When Li Feng got the resurrection technology, he was confused and said that he couldn't understand it. This thing belongs to the scientific side, and it doesn't work with magic. For this reason, Li Feng even gave birth to the idea of entering the university for further study. But later, Li Feng summed up, it is better to practice magic to improve his strength if he has training time, and he has no money and no equipment to resurrect the corpse, plus he is just walking around alone. Why did he resurrect the corpse? He has no shortage of servants. Even if you want to let the resurrected Superman mix into S.H.I.E.L.D. as a spy, it is also after S.H.I.E.L.D. has solicited to climb to a high position step by step to provide Li Feng with S.H.I.E.L.D. internal information, but this is too time consuming. Well, S.H.I.E.L.D. is disbanded but also provides a fart news. After thinking about it, Li Feng simply gave Fury the resurrection technology and asked him to help resurrect the corpse. Then Li Feng secretly controlled the resurrected corpse. Compared with the resurrected corpse of Li Feng, I believe Fury trusts the resurrected corpse more. It will be safe to use it. With the addition of the agent resurrected under Fury's eyelids, the level will not be too low, and the speed of promotion within S.H.I.E.L.D. later it can also be faster. One face is S.H.I.E.L.D., but secretly belongs to Li Feng's agent. How good. If Fury resurrects the corpse on a large scale, it would be even better. S.H.I.E.L.D. Any S.H.I.E.L.D. Snake S.H.I.E.L.D. can be renamed Li Feng's house. As Li Feng circled Bob, he sighed, it's not easy, it's been so many years. Hey, what's your name? When was it resurrected? How many Walking Dead like you did Fury resurrect? Bob was stunned, feeling that Li Feng was a neuropathic person. What he heard? What resurrected or Walking Dead? Why don't you say that zombies are destroyed? Bob ignored Li Feng's question. While observing Li Feng, who seemed unprepared to resist, he pretended to be confused and asked stubbornly, who are you? As soon as he finished speaking, Bob pounced on Li Feng like a tiger, preparing to make a few holes in Li Feng with the knife in his hand. The corner of Li Feng's mouth was slightly tilted, watching Bob hit an invisible barrier with his face while watching a comedy show when he was 1 meter away. It hurts, it still hurts, Li Feng teased Bob, and pointed at Bob with a long stick in his hand. After petrifying him, Li Feng said quietly, little guy, I really thought I didn't know anything unless you said it. Already, naive. After finishing talking, Li Feng painted the magic circle of restraining the devil on the ground on his own, and then cut off his fingers and painted the summoning circle on the petrified Bob's forehead with blood. After Li Feng finished drawing, he carefully checked the magic circle, and made sure that the magic circle was correct before opening a portal connecting to the hidden part of the theater. After all, the mirror space can isolate the existence of hell. Before the portal is opened, no matter how Li Feng summons it, he cannot summon it. To the devil. As soon as Li Feng completed the summoning, a fireball representing the soul of the devil rushed into Bob's body from the portal. Seeing this, Li Feng immediately closed the portal and watched the devil slowly occupy Bob's body. After a while, the devil opened his eyes, first glanced at the surrounding space crystal walls, then looked down at the magic circle on the ground, squinted at Li Feng hiding in the black cloak, and asked, Kamataja's mirror space. I didn't know that Kamataja's people would take the initiative to summon the devil, and tell me what purpose do you have? Li Feng frowned. He heard from the devil's tone that the other party seemed to be familiar with Taj Kama, which was not a good sign. Kamataja's attitude towards the devil has always been to kill or bury it, so the devil who can be familiar with Kamataj is either the upper devil or the elite devil who can escape from the magician chase. Whether it is a high-level devil or an elite devil, it is not what I want. I just want to summon a little devil to become my own eyeliner in S.H.I.E.L.D. In fact, Li Feng is very depressed now. Compared with the few elite demons, Li Feng has set his goal on countless weak demons from the beginning. After all, his slave contract was taught by the demons, and he just used Voldemort. It's just a refurbishment of the Dark Devil logo. The ghost knows whether the elite demons will find loopholes in the contract and take a bite. If it weren't for the method of summoning the weaker ghost, Li Feng would not have summoned the devil. Ghost is so good that it has neither the cunning of the devil nor the strength of the devil. Unfortunately, Li Feng has not learned the spell of summoning the ghost, and he does not know where to learn. Hell can neither support Li Feng to change to a devil nor return the product. Li Feng can only think, since the summons are all summoned, why should I try again? If it fails, it's nothing. Anyway, it's just a try. I'm talking about it. I don't believe you can detect my identity through the cloak. Li Feng took out the wooden box of fake angel feathers from his shoulder bag, while preparing the spell secretly, and asked, "Who are you?" "Me." The devil seemed to be reading Bob's memory, and said with a faint smile while thinking about something, "Mephisto." "Maiden." Li Feng's eyes twitched, and he opened the wooden box and threw it at the devil without thinking. He opened the portal and used Mirage to escape. Suddenly, the devil's heart-piercing scream came from behind Li Feng, which made Li Feng a little confused. Mephisto is also a brother of hell. Even if the strength of the world is greatly reduced, it is not a fake angel feather to subdue it. At most, Li Feng can delay for a few seconds to allow him to escape, plus the devil possesses him. But the strength of the living corpse shouldn't be weakened too much. Unless, this guy is lying to me. Li Feng, who was about to flee, stopped and cast aside the devil who was almost dead. Hesitation. Li Feng finally put the fake angel feathers into the wooden box with magician hands, leaving only a trace of the wooden box exposed, and asked suspiciously, "You said you were Mephisto?" At the moment, the devil seemed to be thrown into a sulfuric acid pool and soaked. His whole body was ulcerated and exuding foul smells. It was powerful to answer Li Feng's question, but the devil saw that Li Feng was about to open the wooden box, so the corners of his mouth trembled and hurried. Said, "I am a loyal subordinate of Mephisto." "What's so?" "Nothing to say." Li Feng lifted his long stick and recruited roar on the face of the devil. It was still a pure physical one. After all, using mana blessing could easily kill the devil. At that time, Li Feng would have to work hard. Summoning a devil, it's not worthwhile. While beating, Li Feng still cursed, "Make you skin, make you gasp when you talk to me." I was so scared that I had a heart attack. What's more of Mephisto's loyal subordinates? I asked how many demons in hell are not loyal to Mephisto. After beating for 5 minutes, Li Feng leaned on a long stick in one hand and held the wooden box in one hand and asked, "Now what do I ask you to answer?" "When I dare to pant, I will open the wooden box and let you dissipate in pain. Take effort to summon another devil." The devil lying on the ground still guarding his face, his eyes turned and nodded, for fear that Li Feng would really kill him, pretending to be surrender, and said humbly and flatteringly, "Yes, my respected magician, what's the problem? Just ask, I know everything." Li Feng didn't deal with the devil once or twice. He understood that the devil in front of him didn't look at the surface and surrendered. However, Li Feng was not in a hurry to see how the devil in front of him had been injured by the fake angel feathers. "Let's talk about the name first. What are you doing here?" "Dear magician, the devil's name is long and awkward. Just call me Bob." "Bob." Li Feng squinted at the devil and asked, "Is it the name of your body?" Bob nodded and said, "Yes, my lord, Bob Mantner is the name of this body. He came here today with his inspector Phil Coulson to capture Marcus Daniels." Li Feng scratched his head, indicating that he had no impression of the name, and motioned for Bob to continue. "Daniels used to be an assistant in a physics laboratory. An experiment accidentally gave him the ability to absorb any energy, but because of the instability of ability, his brain was damaged and he became a member of the neurological army. Perhaps because of the mental patient's wide-ranging thinking and Daniels's ability, Phil Coulson couldn't find the other party's hiding place for a while. Fortunately, Daniels seems to be obsessed with Ms. Audrey Nathan, who plays the cello outside the mirror space, which makes Phil Coulson, who is responsible for the capture operation, think of using Nathan to lure Daniels to complete the capture mission." After listening to Bob's introduction, Li Feng shrugged and smiled. "Well, it seems that you do know the memory of this body, and you know it very clearly." Bob froze for a moment, seeming to understand that what Li Feng wanted to ask was not what S.H.I.E.L.D. was doing here, but, "Your purpose is to know if I have inherited the memory of this body. Otherwise, I really thought I was interested in outside affairs." Li Feng used a long stick to point at Bob's chest to portray the slave contract, and smiled, "If you didn't see Bob, oh, it's you. You appeared in the theater. I had been watching a movie with popcorn in the cinema a long time ago. I don't care if his neurosis would harm the society, and I'm not a policeman." Feeling that Bob, who was a devil but was deceived by humans, was somewhat square, especially seeing the familiar circle on his chest, which made him a little panicked. "You want to enslave me?" After completing the circle, Li Feng grinned and said, "Either be my slave or die. By the way, I would like to remind you that this is a mirrored space. Once you die, it will dissipate completely. Don't even think about returning to hell." Quote. Bob couldn't figure it out. It was Li Feng, who was obviously a human, from where he came from the suspected devil's slave contract, plus the mirror space that he couldn't escape. Now it's okay. I'm a fish, and I'm full of joy from hell from the beginning. He rushed to the world, and as a result, he became a slave. Where would he go to reason? Bob, who has the intention to resist but has no strength, can only obediently sign a contract with Li Feng, thinking about waiting to find out the loopholes in the contract and escape from Li Feng's control. Now, it is better to become Li Feng's spy and shield, at least he has a small life saved. Even if Bob became his own slave, Li Feng just breathed a sigh of relief on the surface, but still did not relax his vigilance in his heart. Li Feng played with the wooden box in his hand and asked, "Tell me about your position in hell." Bob raised his rotting right hand and said, "Dear Master, can you let me get in touch with hell first, so that I can regain some strength, so that Phil Coulson will not see me after I leave the mirror space." Li Feng looked at Bob with a faint smile, stretched out his hand to open the portal, and said, "Want to try if you can return to hell?" "It's okay, just try, I won't stop him." Bob didn't seem to hear Li Feng's voice. He lowered his head while contacting hell to restore his strength. He said in a low voice, "Master, a weak devil like me has no place in hell. The Lord's side has experienced insights, and I don't even know the slave contract." Bob said a lot of bits and pieces, and in summary, he is a useless devil with neither strength nor power. As for Li Feng's belief or not, it is not within Bob's consideration. Li Feng didn't care whether Bob was useless or not. He wished that Bob was useless. It was just the devil's words. One of the 10 sentences is really good. In view of the distrust, Li Feng ordered Bob to be his shield agent as usual and not to contact him without authorization except to send messages through the slave contract. Before leaving the mirror space, Li Feng thought for a while, and said, "Turn your head over, don't look at you randomly, you will have a needle eye." After speaking, Li Feng closed the portal and reopened, shouting to Creature outside the portal, "Come here and do a favor." "Yes, boss." Creature blinked and walked to Li Feng's side and said, "Boss, what's your order?" Li Feng pointed to Bob with his face turned away from him, and said, "Wait later, you will sign the unbreakable curse, with him. I will be a witness, understand?" Creature nodded, walked to Bob's side, grabbed the palm of his opponent and looked at Li Feng. Li Feng put the long stick between Bob and Creature shaking hands, so that Bob, who had been closing his eyes, promised not to disclose the meeting, not to report his identity and other unequal promises. After a series of unequal promises, the long stick shot a tongue of flame around the two palm of the hand. Knowing that the spell has been established, Li Feng waved his hand to signal Creature to leave, and said to the somewhat confused Bob, "Open your eyes, I remind you, once you violate the promise you told before, you have no chance to return to hell. Dissipate directly." Although Bob didn't know the magic of the vow just now, he said that he would not dare to violate his life, and said humbly, "Master, am I going to return to my post now? I'm afraid that Phil Coulson will stay in the mirror space for a long time." Suspicious. At this time, outside the mirror space, a man seemed to be immersed in the sound of Nathan's cello, walking towards Nathan with his eyes closed. Without Bob's reminder, Li Feng knew that this person must be the target of Phil Coulson's arrest. Daniels, how else would anyone run in the theater that was half blocked by shield? Li Feng stretched his hand to open the portal and signaled Bob to get out, while he returned to the RV. The journey of relaxation has become a journey of summoning the devil. Li Feng said that he needs Creature's food to relieve his a little nervous heart. Although Daniels can absorb any energy from the cowhide, including the electric waves of the human brain, electric pulses and other means of forming a corpse, as long as he is still a human, the total amount of energy that can be absorbed will have an upper limit, which also makes Phil Coulson and others with the means of catching, such as using something like a flashlight in his hand. Daniels is forced to absorb a lot of energy, making him indigestion or overloading his body to achieve the purpose of catching alive. After all, Phil Coulson, who looks like a good old man, his purpose is to help Daniels get back to normal, not for killing. When the mission was over, Phil Coulson walked up to Bob and asked, "Do you have anything to say to me? I feel you are a little tired." What kind of exhaustion is Bob? It is quite exhausted. Which devil can face the fake angel feathers and still feel comfortable? He is not Mephisto. It's just that Bob dare not say this. The ghost knows the promise made under the witness of magic at the beginning, and what will happen if he violates it. Bob shrugged, let out a long sigh of relief, and pretended to say in a relaxed manner, I just saw Daniel's feeling a little bit. After all, I am a monster like him, and I don't even have any memory of it, except to fight with you or fight. Killing and killing, I feel like this in this life, just the life of a monster. Phil Coulson patted Bob on the shoulder, and said mildly, you are not a monster, but a person I trust, and you were a member of the special service team before, just. Bob smiled bitterly. Stop, I was only blown up half of my body during the mission. Fortunately, the medical team rescued it in time, but I lost my original memory because of hurting my brain. Spreading his hands, Bob pointed to his heart, said in a somewhat helpless tone, you and my previous teammates have said this 800 times, and the information about me before the accident was also rotten by me, but I still feel that I have become a monster after being treated by you. Phil Coulson scratched his eyebrows and said, well, maybe I have given you too many tasks recently and put you under too much pressure. Do you need me to give you a big vacation and let you go fishing outdoors? No, Bob rolled his eyes and said, I noticed a group of medical team members hidden in the distance when I was fishing last time. The illusion that you can only go out on crutches. After finishing talking, Bob is about to walk out of the theater, looking like he needs to lie down in the car and rest. In fact, the devil doesn't want to talk to Phil Coulson too much before digesting Bob's memory. After all, Phil Coulson is also an agent. It is easy to find the flaws in the words. Just as Bob was about to leave the theater, Phil Coulson's faint voice came from behind, have you seen Austin? Bob was stunned. While wondering if Austin was the magician before, while pretending to be asked, he turned his head to Phil Coulson with a puzzled expression, and asked, Sir, who is Austin? It's my former friend. Phil Coulson smiled and shook his head, it's nothing, go and rest. It wasn't until Bob got in the car and closed the door that Phil Coulson pressed the communication area in the cochlea and said, Sir, did you hear that? On the other side of the communicator, Fury was sitting at his desk with a mobile phone and repeatedly watched the video of Li Feng's sudden appearance in Portland and passing by the theater door. Li Feng was also very helpless. Although he knew he was on Fury's list, he didn't know who was in the theater when he passed the theater. He didn't react until he saw Bob and Phil Coulson, but his face was already nearby. What can he do if captured by his agent and camera? The agent can also send one forgetfulness to make them forget themselves, but what effect will one forgetfulness have on the release of the camera? Is it possible that the camera can still learn to shake his head and say to Fury bashfully, you are not allowed to watch other people's content? Fury, apart from being exhausted, is there anything unusual about Bob? I haven't found it yet, Phil Coulson thought for a while and said, Sir, are you sure Austin will sneak into the theater and meet Bob, instead of just passing by the theater? I believe my instincts. Should we make a bet? I bet $10, Austin has already seen Bob. Fury leaned back in his chair and said with a tangled expression, at the beginning, Austin handed in resurrection technology. When it was given to us, I knew he had another purpose. Now Austin has appeared near the theater, and then Bob has shown weakness. I have proved my guess from the side, unless Bob is so bored that he dared to hide during the mission. The corner uses fingers to vent the excess energy. Now I want to figure out how Austin talked to Bob and whether he used force to talk during the conversation. Otherwise, why Bob was inexplicably weak, and what did they talk about again? Suspected of cooperation. Phil Coulson, who knew that he had committed suspiciousness again, looked away from Bob in the distance, thought for a moment, and whispered, should I take Bob back to the base for a psychological check? After all, Austin will have hypnotic ability. Definitely want to check, but... Fury paused, refreshed the computer page, and opened a profile of a psychologist named Andrew Garner, and said, this time I will find a better expert to do the check, so Bob I will arrange the inspection. Yes, sir. Phil Coulson hesitation and asked, Austin appeared on the streets of Portland. Do I need me to find him? Fury took a deep breath and spit it out slowly, reopened the surveillance video, and watched Li Feng, who was wearing a casual suit and having a small belly, suddenly walked out of a dead end in the video. Fury is very sure that Li Feng suddenly appeared in the dead end, because even if he rewinded the surveillance video for 48 hours, He did not see Li Feng walking into the alley, unless Li Feng was so bored that he was in a daze in this dead end, and he still exceeded 48 hours. I've been in a daze for hours, but it's impossible to think about it with my feet. Fury slandered how much trouble Li Feng's ability had caused him to be, and said quietly, Austin has the ability to open a wormhole, how do you want to find it? And that guy doesn't even have a mobile phone, think I can't do it with satellite positioning. I almost doubt if he came out of the primitive tribe. Phil Coulson frowned, just about to ask something. Fury sighed and said, Phil Coulson, do you know how much money you need to burn to find a guy who can appear in your home or my bedroom at any time? Before Phil Coulson could answer, there was a knock on the door of Fury's office. Fury looked at the door and said to Phil Coulson, bring Bob back to base as soon as possible. After speaking, Fury put down the phone and said to the door, come in. Maria Hill, as Fury's right-hand man, pushed open the office door expressionlessly and handed Fury a document, saying, we are in trouble. Tony She Stark is missing. Fury was stunned. In view of Stark's famous dandy status, he often hooked up a woman on a bed trip where she came to the scene and said to go. It's normal to be missing. After all, no one wants to play Zhang. There was a circle of people watching. Fury couldn't help but joked, well, our weapon expert, Mr. Stark, has disappeared with which woman this time? Hill pointed to the information and said, I'm afraid this time is different from what you think. He disappeared when he returned in a jeep after displaying new weapons in Afghanistan. She Stark is missing. Although it is temporarily impossible to determine what forces attacked the military, this group of people obviously went to She Stark. Afghanistan? Fury asked, squinting his eyes, opening the information and quickly browsing. Listen to you, She Stark has a good chance of surviving now. Who else knows about She Stark? Hill tilted his head and said helplessly on his face, this is a big trouble, and the military can't block the news. It is estimated that the headline in the newspaper tomorrow will be about the disappearance of Stark. This fits She Stark's character very well. He can always dominate the headlines of the newspaper. Fury scratched his forehead a little irritably, put down the information in his hand and ordered, find trouble as soon as possible, constantly She Stark. After speaking, Fury picked up the phone, waited for Phil Coulson to connect and said, urgent mission. On the other side, after returning to the RV to enjoy the food, Li Feng dived into various magic books. Most of these books were looted by Li Feng from Harry's world, but there were a lot of them, and even a few years after Li Feng, there is still a half of them that have not been read. Definitely, this is also related to Li Feng's habit of reading the next book after digesting the knowledge in the book. After all, these are all magical knowledge. A slight error in understanding will have unimaginable consequences. Li Feng doesn't want to die or become disabled inexplicably. It's just that Li Feng, who was immersed in studying this time, had an unexpected gain. He found a weakened version of the magic augmentation potion formula in the book. Although this formula is only 1/10 the effect of the original version, and it also has side effects such as dizziness after use and cannot be used multiple times, the medicinal materials of the formula belong to the common category. The most important thing is that potions can increase their strength faster than pure penance. Holding the formula looted from an unlucky house, Li Feng rushed into the medicine garden with a look of excitement and handed the formula to Creature and asked, Creature, do we have the medicinal materials in the formula? Creature glanced at the formula, and then at the medicinal materials that had been processed but were moldy in the corner, and said, Boss, in addition to the ordinary medicinal materials used by the shop, there are other extraordinary medicinal materials. Li Feng scratched his head and looked at the common ingredients in the formula. Fortunately, the auxiliary medicinal materials in the formula were all available in the market. Li Feng endured the urge to grin wildly, stretched out his hand to open the portal to Portland, and ordered, Creature, prepare the medicinal materials according to the recipe. In fact, there is no need for Li Feng's order. Creature, who is already familiar with Li Feng's character, has consciously selected the medicinal materials in the formula so that Li Feng, who has purchased the medicinal materials, can start cooking the potion at any time when he returns to the RV. In the next 3 months, Li Feng, who was devoted to cooking potions, finally produced the first weakened version of the magic boosting potion after wasting a lot of medicinal materials. Looking at the fascinating blue potion in the test tube, Li Feng thought for a while, raised his head and took a sip. After all, he didn't know how to cook the potion. In case of accidents, Li Feng thought it would be better to give it a small sip. After a while, Li Feng, who felt a little drowsy, understood that this was a weakened version of the potion at work. While shaking Roar's head, he let Creature prop up his sun umbrella in the desert so that he could lie down on a beach chair. Digest the medicine in the sun. After a while, Creature walked to Li Feng with the fruit platter, looked at the figure in the distance in doubt, and said, "Boss, a guest is coming towards us." Stark felt that he would still have to look at the almanac when he went out in the future. He just came to Afghanistan to show off his latest weapons to the military, showing off his talents by the way. How could he be attacked by a group of terrorists somehow? It's okay to be attacked and die on the spot, and it's okay to be rescued by a doctor, but what about the need for a magnet in your chest to keep your fortunes? Stark said that the doctor's skills are not good, which seriously affects his efficiency in picking up girls. This is too ugly. It's not over yet, and I don't know what these terrorists think. They actually want him to build weapons in a dark cave. They also require hammers and wrenches to knock out the weapons. Stark said on the spot that there are no missiles, but it's nonsense. Yes, just ask the terrorists if they want it. In the end, Stark, who did not recognize the reality, was taught by the terrorists. He knew that Zhao Ming was holding Shi in the hands of others. You can only use your hands to knock out the beautiful and life-saving energy that hangs on your chest, and then busy with the weapons that the terrorists want. It's just that the weapon Stark wanted to knock out was a little different from what the terrorist wanted. The terrorist wanted missiles, while what Stark wanted to knock out was the steel armor used to escape. Fortunately, this group of terrorists have a heinously low level of education. They just can't distinguish the difference between missiles and armors. It is so stupid that Stark has a chance to knock out the armor. It's all right now. Stark finally drove the hard-knocked armor to destroy the unknown number of terrorists and then smashed out of the cave where he was detained for 3 months. Stark, who just got out of the cave, discovered that outside the cave, not only did he not see the terrorists who were scared by his armor, but he saw the terrorists greet him with more fierce guns. This made Stark unhappy, and he immediately said that he was outnumbered, and/or leave the Green Hills without worrying about burning firewood and ignite the ammunition stored in the open air and then strategically withdraw. Fortunately, Stark designed the flight mode when he hit the armor with a hammer, so that terrorists who could only run on the ground could not track him for a while. It's just that this armor is only handmade after all. Whether its flight speed or energy is limited, after a short period of time, Stark can only be forced to return to the ground, stepping on the hot sand to continue to escape. The thirsty and tired Stark ran like this for most of the day, and suddenly saw a RV in the distance ahead. Stark was stunned. If he saw the RV in the beautiful scenery, he still understood that he was on vacation, but in the depths of the desert, let alone how the RV escaped the quicksand and drove into the depths of the desert. Let's just say who would drive the RV into the desert for vacation. Apart from sand or sand, what's so good about it? A mirage, it must be a mirage. I think so, but now that the RV appeared in the front, in the same direction that he had set before, Stark still ran towards the RV, praying that it was a real RV. After a while, Stark was sure that what he saw was indeed an illusion, otherwise how to explain the mirror image in the distance. Under a huge amount of sun umbrella, someone was lying on a beach chair eating something, and there was a servant who was suspected to be either a child or a dwarf. Li Feng was stunned when he heard Creature say that someone was walking towards him in the distance. His RV had Omegle deportation curse. Except for the special people with energy in the body, ordinary people couldn't see him. Li Feng looked curiously in the direction pointed by Creature. Although his drowsy mind had been reduced a lot as the medicine was absorbed, the figure in the distance was still a bit blurred. It was not until Stark kept getting closer to the RV. Leaning on the iconic headlight on the opponent's chest, he understood that this was Tony Stark. At the same time, Li Feng also understands why this guy can see the RV. The headlights on their chests can not only save their lives. In the Women's Federation 1, Loki wanted to control the mind of Stark by Mind Gem. As a result, he was completely obsessed by this big one. Lantern blocked, that's Mind Gem. Does it shamelessly or think it can't hold Stark's protagonist plug-in, and let Stark ignore him? It can be seen how powerful this headlight is. Now, Stark just ignores the Muggle expulsion curse, Li Feng said he understands, but... Li Feng watched Stark step by step approaching the caravan, and then inexplicably watched him hit the car with his face. Li Feng scratched his head, and after a glance at Creature, he looked at Stark, who was rubbing his nose with a bewildered look like a mentally retarded one, and asked, "Mr. Stark, haven't you seen the RV?" Stark's brain hurts now, not from crashing into the car, but when he sees that Creature is obviously not a human and judges that the opponent is not a simulation robot, guessing that he has been held by terrorists for too long, causing too much pressure and hallucinations in his heart. If Stark, who simply fantasizes about a caravan, says that he can bear it, after all, he really wants to rest now, a caravan is a good choice, but what he can't bear is that his dignified playboy actually fantasizes about a man. Is he not interested in women anymore? Originally this was nothing, just a little hallucination. After returning to China, he could find a good doctor with his financial resources to treat him, but he didn't say anything when he hit an RV that he thought was an illusion. What happened to Li Feng's words? His ears and eyes clearly told him that what he saw was not an illusion. This is terrible. Stark rubbed his nose and looked at Creature in a daze. He had the illusion that he was imprisoned not for 3 months, but for hundreds of years. Otherwise, when would a creature like Creature appear on the earth? It must be a few hundred years later that mankind rushed out of the earth and captured the aliens, which made him see the aliens serving the earthlings in front of him like servants. Stark was a little dazed, and asked, "Who are you? Where is this? What time is it?" Li Feng rubbed Roar's head and didn't understand what Stark actually wanted to ask what year it was. He just motioned to Creature to go back to the RV and pass the electronic clock to Stark to let him see it. After all, Li Feng didn't know what it was now. What time, anyway? There is still a long way to go before dinner. Li Feng looked down at Stark, frowning and asked, "Are you just escaping from terrorists? Who are you?" About the history of terrorists Stark has not had time to inform others. It can be said that no one except the terrorists knows his whereabouts. How does the person in front of him know his whereabouts? Unless he is also a member of the terrorist. Thinking of this, Stark first glanced at Li Feng, made sure that the opponent had no firearms, then scanned the surroundings to find some good weapons, so as to let the drug-riding guy in front of him suddenly attack. Li Feng pointed to himself and said, "Me. You can call me Austin, a magician." Stark frowned. He found that he had made a mistake. The person in front of him was a terrorist. He was absolutely crazy. Think about it too, except for the neurotic, who would go to the depths of the desert to bask in the sun. How much sunscreen does this have to be applied, or is this neuropath too broad-minded and ready to feed a factory that produces sunscreen on his own? Li Feng saw from Stark's deep contempt that the other party obviously did not believe what he said. After thinking about it, Li Feng snapped his fingers lightly and released the healing technique at Stark. Just when Stark felt his whole body warm inexplicably, and seeing his skin trauma healed quickly, he heard Li Feng smile and say, "This is a treatment technique, but it can only treat your trauma." Li Feng pointed to Stark's palladium metal reactor, shrugged and said, "I can't treat this thing all at once, just like fractures and other injuries that can only be treated by breaking the bones." Experience the treatment history. Stark shook his head to make sure if he was still immersed in the illusion world, but even if Stark shook his brain out of his head, Li Feng still stood in front of him. After Stark's injuries were completely cured by Li Feng, Stark said in an uncertain tone, "Magician." Then he turned to look at Creature, who got off the RV with the electronic clock, and made sure he did not travel through time. Said, "What is this little guy?" "Your magic servant." Magic is just an unknown science. You don't know that there are too many things you haven't seen before. Li Feng casually explained. As for why Li Feng didn't want to explain clearly what magic is, he can firmly remember that after explaining the principle of magic to a certain scientist before, the other party directly put on a posture of breaking the casserole and asking the end. The annoying Li Feng felt flying in his ears. Countless flies buzzed. Coupled with Stark's talent and the heart that wants to take precautions for everything, it is estimated that when Li Feng explained clearly what magic is that day, this guy will create the anti-Li Feng armor the next day. After giving Stark a believable expression, Li Feng stretched out his hand to invite Stark into the RV and said, "As for Creature, he is my house elf, and it is correct to say that he is my magic servant." Shi Stark thought for a while. Intuitively, the chance of Li Feng being a terrorist is not high. Even if Li Feng is a terrorist, Stark is not afraid. It is a big deal to subdue the opponent, and then drive away in a RV. I believe that with the help of the RV, it is better than leaving with his legs. The chances of the desert are even greater. As for the magician identity, the stubborn and arrogant history Stark will not easily believe it. Stark, who walked to the door of the RV, seemed to think of something, and said, "Then Mr. Magician with a small belly, may I ask if you face a terrorist with a heavy machine gun, what the hell?" Before Shi Stark's words were finished, Li Feng smiled and looked at Shi Stark's funny face like a ghost, then turned and got out of the car to look at the car. When Shi Stark returned to the RV with an unbelievable expression, he asked confusedly, "This is space expansion technology?" "What you say is what you say," Li Feng shrugged, picked up the long stick in the corner, and said while touching it, "It's better to talk about where the terrorists are. My little pets are already hungry and thirsty." Shi Stark rubbed the forehead of the building. From the moment he saw Li Feng, he felt his brain hurt. Healing and space technology are aside. After all, science can do it, but the other party is going to use a broken stick to find terrorists with guns. What is the trouble? Do you really see yourself as a magician? This is so sick. Before Stark could answer, Creature, who was about to pour water on Stark, suddenly raised his ears and turned his head to look in one direction, and said, "Boss, I heard the sound of a car approaching." Li Feng grinned and walked out of the RV with a wooden stick. Shi Stark looked at Li Feng speechlessly, then looked at the driver's seat, thinking entangledly, "I am waiting for this neuropathy to be swept into flesh to escape in the motorhome, and now I am driving the motorhome to start running." Shi Stark finally failed to escape in the RV after Li Feng got off the car, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't do it. The first is that there is no key in the RV. Although Shi Stark thinks he can start the RV without the key, it will take time. It is estimated that when he starts the car, the terrorists have already boarded the RV with guns. Secondly, Shi Stark felt that the RV could not run the military jeep in the hands of the terrorists no matter how he looked at it. Stark, who didn't want to be tortured by terrorists even though he was killed, watched with regret through the car window how Li Feng was shot to death, while preparing himself for death in despair. It's just that the next development is completely different from what Shi Stark thought. Shi Stark stared inexplicably as he watched hundreds of black shadows float from the long stick in Li Feng's hand, while the terrorist's muzzle was still aimed at Li Feng, as if he hadn't noticed it. Group of black shadows are general. The temperature drop caused by the Dementor's appearance made Shi Stark feel a little absurd. He didn't understand when the desert would be cold too during the day. Stark subconsciously rubbed his arms to keep warm, and asked Creature, who was also lying on the car window, "Little guy, what are those dark shadows? Why do I think I won't laugh in this life?" Creature looked at the Dementors flying all over the sky with admiration and fear, and Li Feng's tall back, and said, "That's the Dementors, a group of the most evil creatures in the world. They eat happiness. You feel cold is also caused by them." After releasing the Dementor, Li Feng looked at the terrorist with a smile while instructing the Dementor to hold back the desire to eat in undead words, just surrounding the terrorist. For a long time, Li Feng was either in the RV or casting his magic on the sand. As a result, some spells had not been practiced, such as the shaping mind, or the shape-shifting technique used on living people. Now that he has encountered a group of terrorists who do not live or die, Li Feng definitely does not want to miss the opportunity to test the power of the spell. Li Feng propped up the shield, ignoring the suspected warnings from the terrorists, and directly cast a shape-shifting technique on a disagreeable terrorist. When this human being instantly turned into a skunk, the surrounding terrorists were not scary at all. Instead, they were crying and crying with horror, shouting words such as necromancer and devil, and desperately detained them. The trigger hoped to kill Li Feng and fled in a panic. How could Li Feng let go of the test product that was finally delivered to the door so easily? It directly turns into a black fog, uses the phantom migration to catch up with the fleeing terrorists, and detects one by one such spells as Sentence of God and Avada Summing. For a long time, Li Feng, who has gained some experience in using phantom migration and casting spells, feels that if he continues to detect terrorists, he will be killed by himself. He can only regretfully stop his hands and shout in undead words in the air, Wong Kai. When the Dementors who had been starving for a long time opened the meal, they floated in front of the terrorists and took a big mouthful of happiness. In the caravan, Stark, who knew what Dementors from Creature's mouth, curiously watched how the Dementors drew happiness, and saw that the terrorists were all crying like their bosses died, and then lying on the ground one by one. Li Feng's green light shot from the long stick ended the lives of these people. Watching the history of a magician war against terrorists, Stark felt that his mind was a little confused, and the three views need to be stroked. Compared with believing that Li Feng is a magician, Stark believes that Li Feng is an alien with super ability. After all, neither the space expansion technology nor the creature who is in front of him is not owned by the Earth. When Li Feng was standing at the door of the RV carrying a long stick, Stark couldn't wait to ask, "Are you really an Earthling?" "Nonsense." Li Feng rolled his eyes, pointed to his public face, and said, "Have you ever seen such a handsome alien?" Stark looked at Li Feng's belly, shook his head, and said, "I have never seen a pregnant male Earthman." Li Feng, "It's so." Putting the stick aside, Li Feng looked out the window and asked, "You have brought in such a terrorist?" "The gap between my pet's teeth is not full," Stark said with a slightly speechless hand. "I don't even have a weapon to protect yourself. How do you ask me to help you attract mobs? Seeing that I bring dry food to your pet, can you borrow my phone?" "Use phone," Li Feng joked while sitting in the driver's seat snapping his fingers to start the RV. "What is that? What's the use? Is it edible or can it help you kill terrorists?" In fact, Stark had blocked Li Feng's jokes when the RV started, and stared through the car window as he watched the ground getting farther and farther away from him. "Is this an airplane?" Stark subconsciously opened the car window with a circled expression. He wanted to see if there was any projection on the car window that gave him the illusion that the RV would fly. Just open the ordinary, not behind the ordinary transparent car windows. Stark, a tech expert, immediately determined that the buzzing in his ears was the sound of the car engine, not the airplane engine that he had previously thought. Seeing this, Stark shrugged, walked behind Li Feng and looked at the dashboard of the car speechlessly, and said, "Well, you are a magician who knows spells, I understand, but what does it mean that a RV that is a technological product can fly?" "Yes, please tell me, what do you mean by using a car steering wheel to control an airplane? What about your airplane joystick?" Li Feng turned to look at Stark, blinked and said, "I only have a car driver's license, so I am driving a car. Is it plausible that the plane control stick is installed on the RV? What if the police stop me and ask for my plane driver's license? As for Mingming, why do RVs that are cars fly? Maybe RVs have a heart to let themselves go." Stark was taken aback for a moment, and then he realized that Li Feng was joking with himself, rolled his eyes, and smiled. "Car driver's license? Are you planning to lay off the plane instructor? Will you be able to become a flight member by taking a car driver's license in the future? I like your idea. Do you need sponsorship? Let's make a fortune together." Hearing Stark joking with himself, Li Feng smiled. "It looks like you have taken a small step from the shadow of terrorists. How is my psychotherapist skills?" Stark looked down at the trauma on his body, curled his lips and said, "The treatment of trauma seems to be reliable. As for the psychological aspect, I think it is a powerful factor in my own heart. It has nothing to do with you making me happy. You are really nothing. Telephone? There's really no phone." Li Feng spread his hands and said helplessly, "I have no friends or family members. I hide in the desert to practice magic quietly by myself. Why do I want to call?" Stark glanced at the carriage, turned his head to the side and asked, "Don't you have the space to expand the technology? You can't rent a house in the urban area, so that you have enough space to practice magic, hide in the desert and you eat what to drink? Don't tell me you are a magician. You can fabricate these living supplies out of thin air." Li Feng scratched his forehead thoughtfully, snapped his fingers and let the RV drive automatically, got up and took Stark to the 4-door locker, and motioned Stark to open it. Stark's eyes twitched and looked at the autopilot steering wheel. "Okay, this is magic." Then, Stark opened the cabinets in confusion, staring at the lockers running around the chickens, ducks and cattle, then looked at the lockers of normal file size, and said silently, "I think it is necessary to say a few words. Did Coach Flight offend you? Let's let go of this business. Let's study how to enter the real estate market. Why do I sound like the real estate agent has offended you?" Li Feng said jokingly. but then again, you and them are really not the same people. They are building buildings, but you, the weapon manufacturer, are destroying the man in the building is not born to deal with it. She Stark smirked and let out a sigh of relief, and said, no, from now on, in my life label, the weapon dealer claims that roar will no longer apply to me. After that, she Stark didn't seem to want to continue the topic of weapons, and said, is there anything to eat? I feel more hungry when I see these vegetables. Li Feng pointed to the tomatoes in the four-door locker and motioned to She Stark to pick up a few pads on his stomach, then turned his head and shouted, Creature, prepare dinner, our guests are hungry. Yes, boss, Creature will prepare now. She Stark picked a few tomatoes casually, ignoring whether they were dry or not. He opened his mouth and bit. While eating, he looked at Li Feng's farm curiously, and said with an expression of interest in magic, the cabinet door on the side. What's inside? What's there? There are too many things, Li Feng said with a shrug, the kind that can throw you 3 views to the ground and can't fight back. Li Feng's words aroused She Stark's curiosity and asked, can I visit it? Definitely. Li Feng opened the door of the collection room casually and said, welcome to my magical world. After a while, She Stark, who walked into the collection room, said that he had opened his eyes, but compared to the magic items placed on the shelf, She Stark was even more curious to have a time converter with an independent collection shelf, and asked, this is what? Very precious. Li Feng resisted the desire to laugh wildly, and explained the function of the time converter to Stark calmly, especially focusing on time and the quantum realm. He wished to tell him all about Stark's use of quantum energy to travel through time in the Women's Federation 4. Speaking of this, I have to mention Li Feng's purpose. If it is just to send She Stark home, Li Feng said it was just a trivial matter, but he did not send the other person home at the first time, instead he tried to make She Stark happy. All this is that Li Feng wants to get along with She Stark. As long as you become friends with Stark Li Feng can't help but fantasize in his heart, believe that the time converter will arouse your interest. Once you set foot in the quantum realm, you can give me a copy of the information, but only you are not enough. You still have to find a chance to show off magic in front of Dr. Pym, and let him help me understand quantum energy, so that I don't know what to do about crossing the door. Just when She Stark doubted whether Li Feng had any misunderstandings about the quantum realm and magic realm, Li Feng unlocked the layers of magic on the collection shelf, picked up the time converter and said, want to try to travel through time? Quote. Stark didn't say anything. Creature knocked on the cabinet door and said, boss, Creature has prepared dinner for you. Li Feng casually hung the time converter around his neck and said, well, I will show you the feeling of traveling through time. By the way, I will take the opportunity of eating to tell you the rules that need to be followed when traveling through time. I don't want to be because of you knowing the rules to disrupt time, but I was chased by a group of magicians. The sky is big, the food is the biggest, and Li Feng has said so. She Stark immediately put the doubts in his mind behind him. After all, he is already messed up in his mind today and needs a good rest. At the table, Creature prepared 4 dishes and 1 soup according to Li Feng's past tastes. The only difference between today and the past is that there are more chopsticks. As for whether Stark will use chopsticks, this is not within Creature's consideration. I don't know if Stark is really hungry or if Creature's cooking skills are too good. While eating some delicious food, Stark gave Creature a thumbs up and said, Creature, do you want to change to a more promising job? As my personal chef, I can give you 10 times your salary. Creature, who was tidying the kitchen, turned his face when he heard Stark's words, lowered his head and cursed, Mudblood, insulting Creature. Creature, Li Feng had to say aloud when he saw that Creature had committed another old problem, go and see the medicine garden. Stark looked at an angry Creature, then at Li Feng, and asked in confusion, what did I say wrong? Although I don't know what mudblood means, this term is obviously not complimenting me. It wasn't until Creature entered the 4-door cupboard scoldingly that Li Feng explained truthfully and falsely, house elves are magicians' dedicated servants. They are honored to be able to serve magician without receiving compensation. You just mentioned wages. This is an insult to Creature. Stark scratched his forehead, shrugged and said, the more you say that, the more I want to find a house elf to serve me. After all, after hearing your theory about quantum and time, I feel more and more that magic is an unknown energy. Energy can be controlled by science. Unfortunately, I have the financial resources and ability to produce and control energy. This shows that I am also a magician, right? The corner of Li Feng's mouth curled, and he raised his glass to respect Stark. Magician is really good at controlling energy. Inwardly, Li Feng added silently, controlling energy is only one of the magician's methods. Magician is not a short-lived species. This is the difference between magician and scientist. After drinking and eating, Stark watched the RV flight at the speed that a car should have, and said disdainfully, "Your RV has entered the flight field, can't you fly at the speed that an airplane should have? Just like your broken car. The flight speed keeps going, and there is no need to wait for me to return to China. I guess I heard the news of the Stark Group's bankruptcy as soon as I walked out of the desert. Are you in a hurry? Say it early." Li Feng pretended to be suddenly enlightened, got up and said, "Where are you going?" Stark thought that the RV could really speed up, and said with joy, "The United States, even the nearby airport is fine. Then I will call my private jet to pick me up to the company, and let you see what the speed of the airplane should be." Li Feng stretched out his hand to open the portal, grinning and said, "When you have time to call, we have already arrived. New York." As soon as Li Feng's words fell, Stark found himself in the sky over New York after crossing the orange-yellow aperture. Stark took a deep breath with a slightly surprised expression, raised his hand in a gesture of surrender, and said, "Okay, magic, I understand, but I will use technology to prove that this is just the application of wormhole theory. I have to remind you that there are no RVs flying over New York, and I don't want to be chased by missiles. Then they need to be able to see it." Li Feng patted the car, and pointed to the metal palladium reactor on Stark's chest. "A person like you with energy inside, but once I turn on the invisibility spell on the RV, even an energetic person like you cannot see the RV." Stark pointed to the direction he was going, signaled Li Feng to let the RV to the company's flight, then looked down at the reactor thoughtfully, and said afterwards, "Your stealth is just an optical stealth, right? Can evade satellite scans, but those sitting in front of thermal imaging and radar can spot RVs as well." Li Feng shrugged a little helplessly and said, "Yes, this is also a shortcoming, but I am not afraid of being discovered. After all, when I remodeled the RV, I paid a lot of attention to defense." Quote. Stark touched his chin and said with a smile, "If there are too many missiles, you can still escape with the magic just now. What kind of magic just made you from Afghanistan to New York?" Portal. Li Feng saw what Stark was curious about, and said with a helpless expression, "Without the permission of the holy place magician, I won't introduce the portal to you in detail." Stark thoughtfully said, "So you are not the only magician on the earth, but a group. I'm curious, where are they usually? Why don't you come out and meet me? I can provide them with funds for their activities. Magician is really the same as in the novel. Is an experiment the same as burning money?" Li Feng knew what Stark was thinking, and said with a smile, "They are busy guarding this world silently from being invaded by otherworld magical creatures. As for the funds, let's put it this way, even if you are worth 10 times, in front of others, you are still a poor beggar." This is not Li Feng's nonsense, but Li Feng has personally seen how rich the Ancient One is. Not to mention the long history of the buildings in which they live, and even the teacups used to drink tea are antiques. How do you compare with others? After a while, the RV landed steadily on the roof of the Stark building. Just as Li Feng pushed the car door and followed Stark out of the RV, he suddenly noticed that there seemed to be someone talking around him. Stark followed Li Feng's line of sight and saw nothing but a few satellite receivers on the empty top floor. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." Li Feng shook his head wonderingly, and said, "Let's go, let me see what's so interesting about your rich man's office." When Stark walked into the company in torn clothes like refugees, the noise was conceivable, which made Stark couldn't help complaining, "You can't lend me a few clothes? Even a coat will do." Li Feng shrugged. He didn't want to lend clothes to Stark. Li Feng's wardrobe didn't have ordinary clothes. They were all magic clothes that could change styles. Taking Stark's exuberant heart, Li Feng can think of it with his toes. He just lent the clothes to Stark. This guy sent his clothes to various inspections in a blink of an eye, until he understood the magic clothes, and then made restrain the mark model of Li Feng ability. When Pepper Potts heard his boss appear at the company inexplicably, he hurried to the opposite of Stark with a look of astonishment. Obviously, Pepper Potts had a lot to say, but he couldn't say it for some reason. Just looking at Stark with red eyes and biting his lips. Stark raised his brows and looked at Potts, whose eyes were reddened and could not hold back his tears, and said, "The eyes are red. Is this what the boss thinks?" Potts smiled and shook his head. "No, I'm just happy that I don't have to look for a job, I hate it." "Well, your vacation is over." Stark pointed to Li Feng, and said, "Help me entertain this guest and arrange a press conference." Potts looked at Li Feng suspiciously, and said, "Are you sure you don't go to the hospital first? How did you suddenly appear at the company?" "An airplane." Hearing Potts mentioning airplanes, Stark seemed to think of something, pointing to the ceiling and saying, "No one is allowed to go to the rooftop. Believe me, that thing is far more terrifying than airplanes. It will ruin your 3 views." Potts was stunned. He didn't understand the meaning of 3 views of destruction in Stark's words, but seeing that Stark did not show signs of trauma, he could only helplessly pick up the phone to arrange a press conference. While Stark took advantage of the time before the press conference was held, he took Li Feng into his office, opened his arms, made a welcome gesture, and said, "How about it? Better than yours. It's wider than yours." Li Feng sat down on the sofa and said with contempt, "It's not as big as the locker in my house, so I'm so proud of everything." The corner of Stark's eyes twitched. How did this make him refute? He has personally visited Li Feng's locker, not to mention that his office is not comparable to it. Even the home he thought was big enough, its area is not comparable to a locker in someone's home. A little bit unconvinced, Stark said quietly, "One day I will crack your space expansion technology and make a teacup that is bigger than your locker." After a while, Potts walked to the office door with a new suit, knocked on the door and said, "The press conference is ready. You can start after you change your clothes." Stark took the clothes, and regardless of whether anyone wanted to see his figure at the scene, he changed his clothes and said, "Austin, are you going downstairs with me in the office? As long as I mentioned in the press conference that you saved I don't mind your name appearing on the front page headlines tomorrow." Li Feng rolled his eyes at Stark and said, "Forget it, I want to be on the front page and still use you to help. You don't know that I want no one in the whole world to know me, or why should I run into the desert? I like sand. The so-called people rely on clothing, Buddha rely on gold," and Stark, who put on new clothes, waved at Li Feng vigorously and said, "Well, when the press conference is over, you will show me the gadgets around your neck." Li Feng shrugged indifferently, and said, "As long as you follow the rules, it doesn't matter even if you take your wife Ms. Potts to see him." Stark now has been living in the cave for 3 months. Although he understands Potts' inner status, he hasn't confessed to Potts now. After hearing Li Feng's ridicule, Stark glanced at Potts and hurried to release. "Will be on site." With a little embarrassment on his face, Potts glanced at Li Feng, hurriedly behind Stark. On the way to the press conference, Stark listened to Potts' ear and whispered, "Help me check Austin's information." Potts was stunned, then subconsciously looked back at Stark's office, and whispered, "Didn't you say that he saved you?" Stark nodded slightly and said, "But he was a bit too good to me. I always think he wants something else, and..." Stark recalled why Li Feng didn't take him back to New York in the first time but wanted to arouse his interest in magic. He shrugged and said, "Moreover, he and I have only known each other for a long time, uncertain." Potts nodded slightly and said, "Well, you are the boss, you have the final say, I will help you when I am busy at the press conference." "No," Stark shook his head and interrupted Potts. "Go now. I want to get all the information about Austin at the end of the press conference." After that, Stark stepped up to the press conference site, while Potts took a deep breath and then turned and walked into a room. He took out his mobile phone to contact Stark's personal butler Jarvis and asked it to help investigate Li Feng's information. Collecting data is faster and faster than artificial intelligence. After the phone call, Potts hurried to the press conference, hoping to see Stark chatting in front of reporters handsomely, and at the same time praying that Stark would not make any trouble. Although the announcement of Stark's return conference was a bit rushed, the protagonist is also the famous Stark, so many reporters came. In addition, there were also many people who came to satisfy curiosity, among them, some of them were among the reporters. Phil Coulson. In fact, Phil Coulson was confused when he received the news that Stark had returned to China and appeared when the company was preparing to hold a press conference. He wondered how she Stark, who had clearly disappeared in Afghanistan, bypassed the monitoring of the airport, station, etc. and appeared in the company of. Could it be history that Stark would fly with a missile he built? Or is it that Stark has actually been imprisoned in New York? So they only got nothing after eating sand in the desert for 3 months. When Stark announced in front of reporters that he was going to close the weapon manufacturing department, Potts rushed to open her mouth in surprise and looked at Stark in disbelief. Her only thought was that her boss should be sent to the hospital to check her brain. The company that produces high-end weapons closes the weapons manufacturing department. What is this not brain pumping? Phil Coulson, who saw Potts appear, looked at Stark in surprise, but now is not the time to solve why Stark closed the weapon manufacturing department. Phil Coulson walked up to Potts and handed a SHIELD business card to him. Potts said, "Ms. Potts, I am Phil Coulson, agent from the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. I want to know about the disappearance of Stark." Potts was stunned when she heard the full name of SHIELD. She wanted to see the business card that Phil Coulson handed her. With such a long department name, is a small business card enough to print? I know that many departments of the Ministry of National Defense and the CIA have come to me about this matter, but Mr. Stark suddenly appeared at the company half an hour ago, and he stayed in the office with an Asian youth when he came back, so I don't know the specifics. Condition: Asian. Phil Coulson frowned and asked, "Can you tell me what this Asian youth looks like?" Potts glanced at Phil Coulson, thinking what Phil Coulson said is also the National Department. Perhaps there is Li Feng's information. Hesitation said, "I only know that his name is Austin. Do you have his information?" Hearing Li Feng's name popping out of Potts' mouth, Phil Coulson's first reaction was to ask Stark to go to the SHIELD base to be examined by a psychologist to see if Stark's closure of the weapon manufacturing department was caused by Li Feng's hypnotic ability. "If you are referring to the Asian Austin with a small belly, I think we have his profile. He is very dangerous," said Phil Coulson, taking out his cell phone and pressing the number, and said, "Sir, Austin appeared and had contact with Stark. I suspect that Stark has been taken by Austin hypnotic ability. I need an expert group to be there at the press conference." Phil Coulson turned to look at Potts and asked, "Is Austin still in the office?" Potts was a little horrified and overwhelmed when he heard that Stark was being treated by hypnotic ability, and couldn't help but want to drag his boss to the hospital for examination. Hearing Phil Coulson's question, Potts covered his mouth and whispered, "Yes, he is still in Stark's office." Phil Coulson nodded and asked on the phone, "Sir, do you need me to contact Austin?" On the other side of the phone, Fury recalled that he had suspected that Li Feng was a commercial spy, and he did not know where to steal the technique for resurrecting the corpse. If Li Feng was really a commercial spy, he is now in a weapon manufacturing company. Li Summit will not steal weapons information easily. Fury ordered without thinking, "Find Austin as soon as possible. I want to know his purpose of approaching Stark and let Stark check whether the information in the building has been stolen by Austin." After thinking about it, Fury continued, "Stark's team continues to search history in Afghanistan, but the goal is changed." After hanging up the phone, Phil Coulson touched the gun in his back and said, "Ms. Potts, can you take me to meet Austin?" Potts' hesitation for a few seconds, and his boss returned to the company. Potts knew that Stark had positioned Li Feng as a friend. Even if he does not trust this friend now, let an agent who does not know what department he is taking away Stark's friend, it's always a bit inappropriate. Phil Coulson seemed to see Potts' hesitation and said, "I'm not going to take Austin, I just want to ask a few questions in person." "Definitely." Phil Coulson turned his head and glanced at Stark, and said, "You can tell your boss about taking me to Austin." Potts thought for a while and said, "I want the company's security department to send someone to follow you." Phil Coulson nodded slightly and smiled, "No problem." When Potts walked to the office with a few security guards and Phil Coulson, Li Feng was sitting at Stark's desk playing computer games board, playing card games that came with the computer. Due to the design of the office, Li Feng sitting in front of the computer is facing the office door. Because of this, Phil Coulson, who pushes in the door, subconsciously feels that Li Feng is stealing materials such as weapon design drawings in the computer. After all, he doesn't see it. What is displayed on the computer screen? Phil Coulson, who drew his gun and aimed it in one go, shouted, "Mr. Austin, thief is not a real profession. Li Feng glanced at Phil Coulson, and then at the half-played cards on the computer screen. What did I steal from me? Did you steal the cards from the computer? How to steal this stuff? You are here to teach me. Phil Coulson. I remember your name. Isn't the efficiency of marinated eggs a bit too high? I just found me when I returned to New York. Potts heard something from the conversation between Phil Coulson and Austin. He walked quickly to Li Feng and looked at the computer. There was nothing on the computer interface except for a standalone card game. Potts felt that he had been deceived, and looked at Phil Coulson with an unpleasant expression, and said, "Mr. Agent, please put down your gun, or I will ask the security to ask you not to go out." Phil Coulson could feel that Potts was not joking. He could only put down his gun and said, "Ms. Potts, I remind you, this Mr. Austin is a master of hypnotic ability, or can you hypnotic ability with just a snap of your finger?" Before Phil Coulson finished speaking, he heard She Stark's teasing voice behind him. "You actually need to snap your fingers to be a hypnotic ability person." Stark rolled his eyes to Phil Coulson, and stretched out his hand to signal the security to take the unrelated personnel out of the office. This is his office. Now it's not time for the party, so many people are not crowded in his office. When Phil Coulson was taken out of the office, She Stark closed the door and walked to Li Feng and said, "I always thought you only need a look to make a hypnotic ability person. After all, novels and movies all describe magician like that, right? Mr. Li Feng." Li Feng smiled, got up and said, "It looks like you have found out all my old things. What have you found?" Potts was a little confused. She Stark didn't seem to be joking when he described magician. He even used novels and movies to affirm Li Feng's career. Obviously, Potts felt that the Asian youth in front of him might be as legendary as possible from the perspective of certain abilities. Like the magician, at least now she believes that Phil Coulson said that Li Feng can relax hypnotic ability. She Stark shrugged. Can he find out all the information about Li Feng in such a short time? Impossible, so She Stark didn't answer Li Feng's question, but instead asked, "When will you show me your little toy?" Li Feng scratched his head. He couldn't figure out what Stark was thinking, but, leave him alone. As Li Feng took the time converter off his neck, he looked at Potts and smiled. "Anytime, do you need to bring Potts with you? It's a rare opportunity. Don't miss it when you pass by." She Stark touched the tip of his nose, and he looked a little hesitation. "Is it dangerous?" Li Fengshi, who understood what She Stark was worried about, shrugged and said, "Walking on the road will cause somehow to be hit by a car, but as long as you follow the rules, I guarantee it is safer than pressing on the road, and it is an unforgettable travel." Quote. Stark raised his brows and said, "This analogy is true, so I like to drive on the street to make sure no car hits me." After thinking about it, maybe She Stark said that out of safety considerations, he would not play with Potts during this crossing, or he was confident that he could build a time machine in the future. When Potts wanted to play through time in the future, he could use technology to bring waves. Sea travels through time to play. Thinking of this, She Stark stretched out his hand for Li Feng to start performing. On the side, Potts in the cloud and mist that he heard didn't understand what the two were talking about. She just wanted to know if She Stark was hypnotic ability. Potts said in a firm tone, "I want you to go to the doctor now." Before Potts finished speaking, he watched inexplicably what Li Feng took out of his shoulder bag and put it on She Stark, and then put the converter chain around She Stark's neck. Just when Potts felt a little inexplicable and wanted to ask what was going on, she saw Li Feng gently turning the time converter, and then she watched in horror as She Stark, who had just returned to the company, disappeared before her eyes. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.